Good. So, good afternoon, friends. Mr. B.K. Chaturvedi, Chairman of Lovraj Kumar Memorial Trust, trustees of the trust, expert speakers invited to make presentations in today's conclave, and all delegates participating from different locations. I am pleased to welcome you all to this third R&D conclave being organized by the trust. For the benefit of some of you who are not familiar with the trust, let me say a few words about it and its activities. Lovraj Kumar was born in 1926 in an illustrious family, studied at Doon School, then at Allahabad University, and then at Oxford. After a short spell with Burma Shell, he joined Government of India. He was instrumental in the development of hydrocarbon and petrochemical industries in India. He supported indigenous R&D and facilitated the involvement of scientific community with industries. Technology people had great respect for him. Following his untimely demise in 1994, members of the Indian Institute of Chemical Engineers promoted this trust in his memory. The initiative got good support from industry. The trust has taken up several activities like organizing a memorial lecture once in a year, organizing workshops on technical subjects, and research conclaves. Trust is supported by trustees who have come from different backgrounds and are recognized for their achievements in their respective fields. Persons of eminence have provided leadership to the trust, like Mr. Dharamveera, Mr. P.K. Dave, Dr. Abid Hussain, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, and now Mr. B.K. Chaturvedi. Over the years, the activities of the trust have got good recognition and has become a good platform for sharing knowledge and interaction amongst the policymakers, scientific community, and industry. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Chaturvedi, who is the chairman of the trust and has agreed to inaugurate this R&D conclave. Mr. Chaturvedi had a very distinguished career. He got his master's degree in physics from Allahabad University and started his career as associate professor at Allahabad, and then got selected in IAS in 1966. He held various positions in state government of UP and government of India. He has been secretary in several ministries in government of India, including Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. He rose to the highest position in the civil service of the country when he was appointed as cabinet secretary in 2004. Subsequently, he was also appointed by the Union government as member Planning Commission in 2007 and member of the 13th Finance Commission. We are privileged to have him as our chief guest today. We have 6 expert speakers representing prominent organizations in the country. Their formal introduction will be given a little later. The theme chosen for today's conclave is carbon capture and utilization. We all know that the most discussed topic in the world today is about climate change. With continued discussions for over 25 years, most of the world leaders have agreed to take steps to mitigate the risk of climate change. The political approach to negotiate India's position in the global negotiations is a different subject, and our government bodies are dealing with it. But for the scientific community, it is a challenge to find economically viable technical solutions which can be adopted in the country. Even though we have made ambitious plans to install renewable energy plants and made substantial progress in that direction, carbon capture and utilization remains a challenge to achieve the target of net zero by 2070 declared by Government of India. We see a clear possibility of increasing the share of renewable energy as the technologies are identified and the roadmap for their enhancement and improvement is visible, at least conceivable. However, all existing coal-based power plants, steel plants, refineries, chemical plants will continue to emit carbon dioxide. And at this moment, we do not have alternative technologies to make all those products without carbon emission. Therefore, it is imperative to find economically viable technical solutions to capture carbon dioxide and prevent its emission in the atmosphere. Several organizations are working on the technologies in this area. Hundreds, probably thousands of scientists in various organizations are engaged in this research. Possibilities are clearly visible that some of these technologies will be practiced on the industrial scale sooner or later. It will be a major turning point in the industrial history. It's like changing from steam engine to electric motors, changing from herbal medicines to synthetic medicines, changing from fossil fuels to renewable sources of energy. It will be a major change in industrial processes. Technologies for producing steel, cement, various chemicals can change in the coming years. Designs of reactors, furnaces, and other equipments can change. So our scientists and engineers have a Herculean task to carry out this change. The concept can be put in two parts. One is to change our processes to eliminate or reduce carbon dioxide emission. And the other is wherever CO2 emission is unavoidable, to capture that carbon dioxide and find ways to utilize it. Today's conclave is organized to facilitate sharing of information among the scientific community about the work being done by scientists in different organizations. Scientists can share their successes and failures so that others can learn from them. Based on it, scientists can make their plans for further development work. Every scientist's work is a contribution in that development process. I would like to mention about the organizations who have supported and sponsored this conclave, like HMEL, Reliance Industries, Engineers India, and Bharat Petroleum. I'm thankful to them for their support. Friends, I welcome you all in today's R&D conclave. Since it is online, we have a very good participation. Delegates can participate without traveling, and speakers can speak from their locations. And that's how we have a large number of delegates participating today. Please put your questions in the chat box. They will be taken up in the question and answer session later on. And I now invite our chairman to give his inaugural address. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Shyam. And may I welcome, extend my own word of welcome to the participants and all the members, and especially thank the speakers and some of the people who have organized in our trust. Ajay and his team, many of those people have really worked hard on organizing it. So let me thank them for this. As Shyam very rightly mentioned that, you see, after the Glasgow meet, it was clear that the nations of the world are very perturbed about the carbon emissions and the climate change issues, whether they can confine it to 1.5 degrees centigrade increase in temperature or 2 degrees, they have been very concerned. So every nation did made a commitment. India made a commitment that by 2070, they will have a net zero emission. And by 2030, they will have 500 gigawatt of renewable energy as an intermediate step towards it. And then they had, there are other steps in the intermediate stage about improving the energy efficiency of the economy. These are important steps, and as we move forward, our economy moves forward, we will have to keep a watch of how we perform on these. In case we are to achieve a net zero emission, one of the most important steps is, of course, the question of energy efficiency. Energy efficiency of the various sectors. The papers circulated mentions cement, paper, steel, which are highly carbon emission this thing, and therefore they need to reduce their they need to improve their efficiency. But apart from that, one of the major area identified in the world globally by other organizations is the air conditioning and the transport sector and the question of consumer goods. So many of these will need to improve their energy efficiency, because the first thing is that we must use less energy in case we are to ensure that we are to have a zero emission. The second most important thing once we reduce the energy efficiency is that whatever is being emitted, how to capture it and how to reduce the carbon emissions to net zero. Well, we have identified that we don't use the carbon emitting power and energy resources. So renewables is one. But renewables itself cannot really provide all the energy. That is not feasible. We'll have to use other sources of energy for that. So we cannot really do away without, as far as the present technology goes, without the use of coal or petroleum for that matter for the time. So given that, carbon capture has an enormous importance. Carbon capture and use, that whatever is being emitted in the atmosphere, how can we take it back and bring it, either store it underground or recycle it and use it in other forms so that it doesn't get emitted as carbon in the atmosphere. What can we do for that? The paper mentions a number of technologies. I'm sure the speakers would be sharing their experience and mentioning how they are thinking of using it. I recall in the early 2000s when we were doing this renewables. At that point of time, the cost of solar power was around 20 rupees per unit. Today it is 2.5 rupees per unit. So the point I'm making is that we will have to work in technology domain to see that the cost of this carbon capture is such that it is affordable for the industries. Otherwise, the industries won't use it, and this will remain only on paper. So I'm sure that the various methods which are being used would be discussed in the conference, and there they will not only discuss the various technologies, but how they can reduce the costs for the economy and for the unit which is using it. In case we can reduce the costs as well as develop these technologies for individual units, as well as for storage, transportation, and mass utilization of this carbon dioxide, which is produced in a way which is economic, I'm sure that we would be well on our way to this carbon capture use, which is affordable for the economy and will be used widely. I'm looking forward to these deliberations. These, and there'll be many, many more deliberations, I'm sure, in the coming years, as we exchange knowledge and exchange information among scientists and among our researchers and organizations who are using it, so that the final outcome is of an economic model which is usable by various organizations who are consuming energy. With these words, I once again thank all the speakers and all the participants. I'm looking forward to the deliberations of today's conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman sir, and thank you, Mr. Shyam Bank, for having given and set the background for today's conclave. You have brought out excellent points and the pointers to the relevance of the topic. We have also made a theme paper for the conclave, which I actually wanted to circulate well before the event, but it took a little longer time, and we could manage to circulate it to the speakers only. But we hope to send it to all the delegates who have registered also for the conclave in the next few days. This having been said, I will commence today's conclave without any further delay. And the order that we have proposed is that we begin with Dr. Abhinav Trivedi, who is with the Niti Aayog. The purpose of having him as the first speaker was since he will speak about the policy aspects of the CCUS, he will set the stage for subsequent discussions and presentations to come. So let me have the introduction done for Dr. Abhinav Trivedi. He is a consultant in the office of member Niti Aayog, Dr. Saraswat, and is responsible for evolving roadmap for clean coal technologies, carbon capture, utilization and storage, hydrogen production and storage, and methanol economy as well. He is also involved in the future coal strategy of India and has worked on the development of energy data maps and on implementation of methanol for vehicular applications. He is a PhD from IIT Delhi and a master's from Jadavpur University. And his topic for today's presentation is CCUS Policy Enablers for India. Dr. Trivedi, you will have roughly 25 minutes. You get 5 minutes more because we are short of one speaker today. So you get his quota of some time as well. So after 25 minutes, we expect you to complete your presentation. Will you prefer to have the questions to be handled immediately after, or would you like to wait till the end of the sessions? How would you prefer it? You'll have to unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, a very good evening, sir. Sir, we can have the question answer side by side along with the talk itself.
Fine. Okay.
And sir, first of all, very thank you to Mr. Chaturvedi, Mr. Deshpande, and Shyam Bang for inviting me to speak at the August gathering. I'm very much delighted to speak in this gathering, although still, as you know, that Niti Aayog is evolving a CCUS policy. These days, the carbon capture, utilization, and storage is fast becoming an essential tool in the race to decarbonize coal and the gas-fired power plants, and as well as the heavy industry applications. As we all know that it prevents the CO2 emissions, and CCUS is a process in which once the carbon is captured, we can use it as a resource or we can store it deep underground. But since we can use it as a resource, so our much more focus is towards utilizing the carbon, how to utilize it. So in this whole context, I just want to share a small, very small presentation. So this is all my idea, and although Niti Aayog is a front runner in developing the CCUS policy for India, but this is at a very, very nascent stage, and we are still working on it. But whatever I am presenting is just my idea, then where we should move. So, sir, I am sharing a screen. I hope the screen is visible to you, sir.
Yes, it's visible. Please go ahead.
Perfect, sir. So through this, I just wanted to start the whole thing through the whole conversation through this particular slide, because in this we have estimated that what were the total CO2 emissions in 2018, which were in tune of 2.3 GTPA, and which is forecasted to 4 GTPA, in which the power industry, the power sector, the industrial sector, the transportation are the major are playing a major role in the increase of these emissions. So considering that what we have just decided, what our Honorable PM just announced in COP26, if we talk about the reduction in the CO2 emission by 2030, then from my calculation, we should go for at least 1.3 GTPA CO2 reduction by 2030 to achieve the commitments. India needs to address its rising GHG emission without compromising the economic growth. So to do this, we can focus on coal gasification, which is coming up in a very major way. As you must be aware about it, that recently the coal gasification mission was launched, and again there is another committee which is formed to go for this coal to hydrogen using the coal gasification. Then in bioenergy sector, we are already moving ahead. We have done it with the bioethanol. Then we have a scheme such as Satat for bio-CNG. Similarly, reuse, recycling, natural gas, renewables, energy efficiency, and CCUS is connecting all these dots together. So as this is even over here in this particular graph, that the power, the industrial sector, and the transport and the transportation sector are the major emitters of CCUS across the globe. So scenario is more or less similar in India or around the globe. This is an illustrative representation of emissions trajectory. If we want to go for 1.5 degrees Celsius, if we want to achieve this 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario. So this is a global scenario which is being plotted over here. So the black one is the net emissions if we go ahead as business as usual. But since we are collecting it over here, so then there are some sort of removals as well. So likely it is very likely then we can reduce the emissions globally so that we can bring it down to 1.5 degrees Celsius thing. So before moving ahead to the CCUS chain, we should understand that what is the process which is being followed. So first of all, the CO2 source identification has to be done. So the CO2 source could be the mobile source, which is very much challenging. The mobile source are our automobiles, and even the human beings ourselves. Then the point sources, and then the atmosphere. So our whole focus is to capture the point sources, because here we would be getting a pure CO2, and then we have a huge concentration of CO2 from the cement plant, from the steel plants, from the power plants. Then the CO2 is captured and separated. It's purified using various technologies. It's compressed, transported, and then it's utilized. So this particular slide depicts that what technology can be used as of now. So for the CO2 capture, we have a traditional carbon capture and storage thing. Then we have a direct air capture. Then we can couple up the biomass along with the CCES. As far as the storage and utilization is concerned, the storage, as we all know, that it has to be done in the aquifers, or we can go for the enhanced oil recovery. Even in India, we are moving ahead for the enhanced oil recovery thing. This is happening in Gujarat, as you all must be aware about it. Then there are certain solutions for the utilization. We can utilize the CO2 for the cement production, for the production of synthetic fuels such as methanol, and then various chemicals can also be produced. So there is a company, there is a Tuticorin based company. They are investing in chloralkali from captured CO2. So these things are happening. So here I would like to talk about that what are the key utilization area. So the proven technology are the and usage of CO2 in the beverages and the food market. So India has an opportunity which is listed here. So there are 2 points opportunity for India. One, that the Indian oil fields are increasing towards the maturity, so we can use the enhanced oil recovery thing, and we can expand our food and beverages industry that will consume more and more CO2. So these are the lowest hanging fruit, and these two technologies are commercially proven at a scale. So without thinking anything, we should directly go for it. Then there is a second major aspect coming up is CO2 to building materials. Usage of CO2 for formation of aggregates, for the for concrete curing. So here, this particular graph shows the commercial development score versus the technology score. So so all these technologies are having, so the CO2 upcycling is having a high potential. Then the carbon cure technologies for the concrete curing are still being developed. So here we have a huge market. India has a huge market because in a country, in a developing country like India, so we are more and more into the infrastructure domain. So we have a huge market of aggregates, concretes. Then since during the steel making, we have a huge amount of steel making slag. So that is also available as a substitute for cement. But we need to do a thorough techno-economic analysis for its commercialization. Then there is a third new thing, that is CO2 to chemicals. So as I discussed earlier as well, that we can convert CO2 to produce methanol. As you must all be aware that Dr. Saraswat is very much pushing the methanol fuel. The Niti Aayog itself is pushing a methanol fuel into a very, very big way. So the CO2 can be utilized for the production of methanol, which can be inherently then used for power generation in the telecom towers, or it can be blended with the petrol and it can be used. So this is a very good opportunity for India with a high possibility of import substitution. And this particular thing provides an innovative pathway to reduce the cost of the whole thing, because we are getting something which is very, very useful, for our industries as well as for the automobile sector. So this is a sort of a glimpse of the CCUS industry, where it's going globally. So as of now, in 2020, it is less than less than a €1 million industry, but it is going beyond 15 billion pounds in 2050. So we need to heavily invest into this sector, because India can be a front runner in this particular sector. So here are the list of some commercial CCUS facilities. As of now, globally, around 27 facilities are in operation, which is capturing close to 36 million ton per annum of CO2. And if we compare it from the last year, then from the last year itself, we can see a big boost in the projects which are in the advanced development or which are in the early development. So this showcases that the CCUS is the need of CCUS is increasing, and we should move in sync where the world is moving. One of the why you must be thinking that why I suddenly shifted to the hydrogen production and its utilization. So all these are the global figures. So why hydrogen? Just because along with India, several other countries, they have declared that they are going to be a hydrogen economy very, very soon. So but still for this green hydrogen thing, the things are under development, and globally everywhere the hydrogen is either produced from coal or majorly from methane reforming of the natural gas. So if we see the statistics over here, so the hydrogen production globally is around 120 million ton per annum, which is expected to reach up to 530 million ton per annum by 2050. And this is going to be a mixture of green and blue hydrogen. So in production of blue hydrogen, the CCUS is going to play a very, very major role. So these are the information which I retrieved from the Hydrogen Council report. If we see here where we are and where we will be moving. So currently, if we go through the coal gasification or the CCS thing or the SMR coupled with the CCS, then still the price of the hydrogen is far more comparable than the electrolysis thing. Even in the long term, when it is expected that the electrolysis based hydrogen costs will come down, at the same time, due to the advances in the technology, the prices of the CCUS will also come down, which will result in much more cleaner hydrogen. So this is a emission intensity of the hydrogen production techniques. As you must be aware that most of the electric power which is used in our grid is coming from coal. Close to 78 to 79% of electricity which is on our grid is from the coal-based thermal power plant. So the hydrogen is only green whenever the electrolysis is coupled with 100% of the renewable electricity. When it is not coupled with the electricity, then we must be roaming around in this particular space. So if we consider this space and then we consider the coal gasification with the carbon capture, then the coal gasification with carbon capture presents a all new different picture than what is expected. So we must go for the CCS thing. So this is again a one major driver. The hydrogen mission can be coupled up with the CCUS mission and the coal gasification mission. This is a very good finding which I found, that if we try to estimate the total cost of the infrastructure to support production of blue hydrogen versus green hydrogen, then the total infrastructure cost globally to produce 530 million tons of hydrogen. For the blue hydrogen, this is coming to about $243 billion. Whereas if we go towards the green hydrogen thing, then for the infrastructure which is required for the renewable generation and for the electricity transmission, the whole investment will cross $800 billion US. So as a fraternity, we must think that which way should we move ahead. So coming back again to the policy thing. So there are two types of policy. One is the penalizing policy and the second one is the technology push policy. So the technology push policy is what India requires, because this will kickstart a mechanism to increase the adoption and to drive down the cost of capture in India. It will establish a market for carbon-based products, and maybe the government subsidies will offset, which is offsetting from the tax revenue, will increase the industry growth in India. So this is the most effective way to move ahead as per my understanding. So if we are moving towards that way, towards the technology push kind of a policy framework development, then what should be the from where we should learn from such previously successful schemes? So we have to learn in the domain of carbon pricing, carbon subsidies, support for the low carbon products, innovation and R&D, which is happening across the globe, then the regulatory standards and the risk mitigations. So based on all these documents which are available globally, we may take these documents, the points listed in these documents as a base, and then we can build on our own policy for CCUS. So from my perspective, the approach and the methodology for developing a CCU framework should be something like this. So this is not just this is not a official Niti Aayog methodology. This is something what I feel. So initially, we must do the international policy reviews with the inputs from countries such as USA, Canada, UK, EU, Australia, and the institutions such as IEA, US Department of Energy, GCCSI. And through this review, we can reach upon an output for carbon pricing and subsidies, how they are managing, then what are the supports which are being offered for a low carbon products, what are the supports which are offered for a low carbon products, then the cluster design philosophy, the risk mitigation techniques, then in the case of CO2 capture storage, then the technology case, then the inputs would be from which, what are the CO2 sources and what are the technologies applicable based on that, the source means based on the amount of CO2 which is available, based on the quality of CO2 which is available. So we have a CO2 source, we can then go for the CO2 capture process, where to capture the CO2, and then where to and how to utilize and store the CO2. So the outputs would be obviously the technology cost, the business opportunities, the cluster design again. Then similar exercise we need to do for the financing mechanism and the risk mitigations, where the inputs are the funding sources and the conversion costs and the business opportunity, so that we can come out with an output that where the private investments would be there, what should be the government support, what should be the ROI for such projects, what should be the tax revenues. And at last, it comes regulatory framework and the social impact. So we must know what is the amount of the CO2 capture, how we are utilizing it, how we are storing it, which will result into inviting FDIs, the employment creation, getting the carbon credits. By this, we can make our industries more and more viable. Okay, just a minute, something happened. Just a minute. Yeah. So what are the possible policy measures which can be taken? So government need to establish a regulatory environment to allow the CCUS technology to be deployed at a scale and at an early scale. And it can support establishing a new industry, because the potential of CCUS for attaining a net zero is a very vast, and we have to move towards the net zero. And the net zero doesn't mean curtailing the usage of coal or the natural gas. So CCUS through CCUS only we can achieve a net zero even by utilizing coal and the natural gas. Then to build the CO2 transport and storage infrastructure at a scale to bring down the cost, encourage the CCUS uptake by the industries. By doing this, we can plan a way towards the net zero, and then we can prepare, we can guide the other international fraternity so that they can build their own standards for CO2 storage, transportation, and so that it can be used by them further. Then there is one possible intervention for EOR. So enhanced oil recovery is one area where India should explore. First of all, we should strengthen the competitiveness of CO2 enhanced oil recovery for the oil and gas industry. This will this will reduce the relative cost in compared to others, as well as this will give rise to a competition between multiple companies. Then we must encourage the oil and gas industry to use CO2 for the enhanced oil recovery. That is a very must thing. Then we must incentivize the CO2 capture from the anthropogenic sources as well. And we should aim towards increasing the amount of CO2 stored by promoting the R&D in the CO2 sequestration. Recently, the R&D is being done at, some people are doing it at this Jawaharlal JNSCR. There is an institute in Hyderabad. Then at IIT Bombay, group is doing work on this. Then CSIR NEERI Nagpur is recently coming up with a facility to work on it. So we must do all these things. And at last, CCUS for developing the products. So we must establish an overall policy strategy and the pathway for CCUS in industry. We must design the necessary R&D priorities. We must have the commercial potential, the incentivizing policy mechanism, the legal framework. Then we must promote the R&D program for CCUS as well in India, because again, we must not rely on what the Westerns are doing and then importing everything from there to here. We must set the standards to help the industry to develop products with CO2 and promote the usage of those products, so that promote the usage of those products along with the line ministry. Suppose if there is a company which is producing the CO2 based bricks or CO2 based concrete, then we must promote the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Ministry of Road Transport, so that they can promote the usage of these things. And then introducing of the financing mechanism. So the other group which is working on the tax, which is working on the pricing mechanism, on the economics of the whole thing, they must work towards tax credit, carbon pricing, mandating what we call it, then carbon credits and all those things. So by this we can move ahead towards achieving the net zero thing and whatever the commitments which were done in the COP26. So thank you all for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Abhinav. I'm sure you have attracted a lot of interest from the viewers, because I see a lot of questions. But before I take the questions, I just want to ask the map that you presented regarding policy incentivization or enabling. Is there a timeline that is being thought of by you or by Niti Aayog, by which it will be implemented, so that by 2030, whatever targets we have committed, we are in a comfortable position to achieve them?
So to be very frank, this is something what we are envisaging. So these are the calculations, and the exact thing would be from the exact statement from the Niti Aayog side would be made clear somewhere around March 2022. So these are just the numbers. So maybe multiple iterations are required for these numbers as well. So once that is done, we would be in a much better position to comment on it. I would be in a much better position to comment on it.
So March 22 is probably the first milestone that you will be reaching, by which time you might be able to make some kind of an announcement, maybe a preliminary announcement.
Maybe a preliminary announcement.
Okay. So now let's go to the questions. The first question is how the government of India will support the technology developed by the Indian organizations concerning CCUS, I suppose.
So this question, I think, have been asked by Dr. Premnath.
Yeah.
So what I would request from Dr. Premnath, so this is something related to grant of funds for the commercialization. So I would request to Dr. Premnath, if you kindly drop an email to me, so that after going through the detailed proposal, I can connect with you offline in one-to-one chat. I will love to do this.
Good.
Right.
It's a very positive way of responding. Thanks a lot.
No. We do such things, sir. We do such things.
Okay, let's go to the next one.
Hmm.
Okay, that is a question about the possibility of reducing CO2 emissions in petroleum refining. Either you can take it right now, or we'll wait for Dr. Ajit Safre to handle this question when he presents.
I think Dr. Ajit Safre and I am seeing Dr. Ramakumar is also going to be there.
Yes.
So these two are most
Better, more suited to answer this question.
Yes,
Okay.
To answer this question.
Good. India is going in a big way towards methanol manufacture for 20% blending, the involved process, fermentation gives, etc., etc. So let me see, which can be utilized in the nearby fertilizer plant area. As in the past, fertilizer plants were set up near petroleum refineries to utilize now being produced due to the technology. Whether there can be policy directives to set up ethanol plants near fertilizer plants.
Yes, this can be done, but again, sir, this is so. Although Niti Aayog is the body which has come up with this ethanol blending program of 20% ethanol, along with the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. But now this subject is being handled by a separate ministry. So the question goes to the ministry themselves. So I can't comment on the basis of MOPNG, but definitely there could be this particular drive to put up the ethanol plants near to the fertilizer plants.
Okay. Next is there any initiative underway for inclusion of CCUS in National Action Plan for Climate Change, especially for CO2 EOR or CCS? What is the current status of that?
So as I already told to you, sir, that we are still under the framework for this particular thing is under development. So by March next year, we'll come up with some sort of framework. This is all just the preliminary work. This is what something I presented in front of my seniors also here in Niti Aayog.
Okay.
That what is this is all my perspective, what I have presented.
Okay.
Right.
There's a very long question, a technical question from Dr. Avdesh Narayan regarding the if CO2 is captured and converted in methanol, 33% of hydrogen will be consumed for production of water. For every 32 kg of methanol and 18 kg. Finally, if methanol is blended in gasoline, it will again emit as CO2. Only then how will it help in reducing emission through some reduction will there be compared to gasoline? I guess yeah, please.
So to answer this, this is just a cycle. This is all just a carbon cycle. So anyhow, whatever CO2 we would be consuming, so we are going to consume it to produce something, and that something will again be utilized. So rather than adding up a fresh CO2 in the atmosphere, what we are doing is we are just running the same cycle. We are capturing the CO2, converting it into methanol, and then again emitting it. So there is going to be a net carbon balance. So that's why in this particular way, this CO2 to methanol and then again its usage for automobile thing is going to be a valuable proposition.
Okay. I think that's almost to the end of the questions, I suppose. Scope, that's the next question is regarding scope 1 and scope 3 and emission from refineries. I guess it will be addressed by Ajit Safre because I remember him presenting about this little bit earlier in one of his earlier presentations. So let it be handled by Dr. Safre. What is your view on turquoise hydrogen? That's one question.
So turquoise hydrogen, I haven't heard the term before.
Okay.
That what is this turquoise hydrogen?
I think it is using nuclear.
So basically, this is something where we are using the methane from the biological means. I hope so. So if we are using the methane, suppose the source is biogas. So if Mr. Pramod Kumar is talking about that, then I can't comment on turquoise hydrogen as of now, because but maybe we can definitely talk about it in a one-to-one thing. So that we can do.
Okay. So we are close to come. We are come to the close of your questions on your presentation. But in case there are any to follow in the subsequent, we will come back to you. But I guess probably that should be done for now. And we move to the next speaker.
Thank you very much.
And I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Ajit Safre to the audience. Dr. Safre has more than 40 years experience in the oil and gas, refining petrochemicals, renewable energy business, and has contributed several technology innovations, including doing the commercialization. He has a PhD in chemical engineering from University of Delaware and has worked on process, catalyst development, reaction engineering, biotechnology, modeling, technical computing, intellectual property management, etc., etc. He has more than 50 US-based patents to his credit. So it's a very brief introduction that you have put for yourself, Dr. Safre, but I think you're well known in the industry, so more introduction is not really needed right now. So over to you, please.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Let me figure out how do I load my presentation.
Okay. Topic of your presentation, I would just like to have the audience be informed. Technology developments for sustainability, one perspective. I guess it will be your own perspective about it. So
I guess I'm just trying to figure out on this Zoom, where do I have a button that talks about sharing the sound and the video of a video that I have to play. So let me stop share and start share. Is that what I have to do?
Sir, you can go on the top of your screen where you'll see sharing options are coming.
Yeah.
At the right corner, there would be a more button.
Right.
Click on that, and then you'll get a in the menu. You'll see share
sound and
yeah,
optimize for video clip. Okay, I got it. All right. So is my presentation visible?
Yes, very much.
You know, I think it is an honor and privilege to be invited to participate in this R&D conclave organized by the Lovraj Kumar Trust and give my perspective on carbon capture and utilization at this August gathering of experts. I'll cover CCUS in a broader context of sustainability. Here is an outline of my presentation. Global challenges are listed on the top left-hand corner. And I'll discuss some of our own in-house developments in RIL as a part of the outline listed on the right-hand side. As perhaps you may know, I never talk about what is on the slide. I'll just talk about what comes to my heart. As perhaps some of you know, the Himalayan glaciers are retreating rapidly due to global warming. India is at the risk of losing its major rivers, source of drinking water and irrigation for more than 1 billion people. The chart on the bottom right is actually about the CO2 cost in atmosphere, and everyone knows it's rising. The chart on the left-hand side is about the frequency and the magnitude of impact of unusual events like flooding and fires and cyclones in the US. And weather patterns in India are also changing with unpredictable monsoon, flash floods, and droughts. So this is something we absolutely must need to take it seriously. Bill Gates in his recent book has articulated how to avoid climate disaster in a very simple, easy to understand language. He lists key human activities such as making things like cement, steel, plugging in like electricity, growing things. Actually the plants and animals are also a big contributor. Mobility, keeping warm and cold, and so on and so forth. Today, the world emits about 15 billion tons of total greenhouse gases, including CO2. And we absolutely must need to come to zero very, very soon. Now, the concept of green PMM is very simple. There are a lot of alternate technologies, green technologies being developed, and they need to compete with the fossil-based technologies which are existing today. And the delta cost between the green technologies and the existing technologies, the green premium. And the challenge obviously for us is to reduce that green premium or eliminate it completely. To combat climate crisis, we need a multi-pronged approach. And as the previous speaker spoke about, we need all kinds of things, including CCUS. So I'm going to cover many of the topics the way I see things that should evolve from a purely technical perspective. So let me begin. Here is a summary of the many CCUS approaches, which are summarized on this chart. And I'll not go through every one of them. I think most of you are quite familiar with this. CO2 is either directly used or converted into useful forms. And in Reliance, we have evaluated almost every one of these options quite carefully. We are actively progressing a few of them. And I will briefly touch upon just a couple of these, just to give you a glimpse of what we're doing. Now, I guess we also know about the various ways in which CO2 is sequestered. CO2 enhanced oil recovery is certainly low-hanging fruit. And I don't know why India is so far behind the rest of the world, but I was, previous speaker talked about that we are going to go in a big way. Certainly storing in saline aquifers and basalt is going on. There are several projects that we discussed before. So there's a chart here that talks about it, what has happened since 2010. In fact, the activity started way back in 1990 with the first project in Sleipner, where we are sequestering CO2 in Norway. And actually, I was involved in that project with the previous company. So let me switch gear and talk about the hydrogen. And I'm going to talk about hydrogen from a biomass using our catalytic gasification technology. And that can convert the agri-residue to hydrogen. It's an example of converting waste to wealth. It will solve air pollution problem in Delhi and other northern Indian cities. And at the same time, stimulate rural economy, as there will be a price for the agri-residue that is currently being burned. So it's really truly a win-win proposition. So let me briefly talk about the technology. What we have developed is a dual bed system similar to an FCC unit. We use a solid catalyst to actually gasify solid material, whether it's a biomass or coal. And we have developed an entirely new catalysis called novel migratory catalysis. Due to use of catalyst, gasification temperatures of below 750 degrees centigrade. And most importantly, catalyst eliminates star formation, a common challenge with thermal gasifiers. With predominantly steam gasification, our hydrogen to CO ratio is very high. And the dual bed design allows us to regenerate the catalyst using air. Our overall capex and opex, therefore, is about 40% lower compared to any thermal gasification in the world. And I must know gasification. We got 10 of these thermal gasifiers in Jamnagar, for instance. By the way, same technology can be used for monetizing high ash Indian coals as well, and make India less dependent on imported energy, especially when coal gasification is coupled with CCUS. You can also mitigate the CO2. We've been talking to Dr. Saraswat and Niti Aayog about this technology for more than 2 years. I think they're more than warming up to an indigenous technology that would help India to achieve some major goals. So let me switch gear and talk about another opportunity, and this is converting municipal solid waste, the organic content of it, to a biocrude. Again, I will not talk about the details on this chart. Basically, it says that Indian cities are growing fast compared to the rest of the world, and we are generating a lot of waste that we need to manage more cost effectively and also produce a better product. And so I'm going to talk about RIL's, what I call a catalytic hydrothermal liquefaction, that can convert any organic waste to a green crude. And the biocrude policy is what something we absolutely need. The process is schematically described on the top with some minor feed processing. The organic material or municipal solid waste or agri waste or whatever you want goes to this high pressure ARCAT HTL reactor where you use the catalyst. The product separation is very simple. You get a biocrude. You can either hydroprocess it to make transportation fuels, or you can directly combust it to make heat and power, even making electricity, if you will. The photographs below show the scale of our pilot plant, and you can see from the left, it's a fairly large, almost a semi-demo scale plant that we have built, and we've been using it quite successfully. Just to put in perspective, where does the ARCAT HTL stand technically compared to other options being pursued in India? So ARCAT HTL is the bottom part of the middle curve, middle part of the chart. And I'm comparing it to power generation just to make electricity, or 2G ethanol with fermentation, Shell's IH2 technology, or anaerobic digestion. The key point you want to note here is that amount of energy in the feed that ends up in the product is 75%, and I call that thermal efficiency, which is the highest for RCAT HTL compared to all other technologies being pursued. And in case you have a wet feed, which is the case for majority of these biofeeds, since the water is a co-catalyst, our process is even that much more beneficial. This chart summarizes the overall economics of the process. And what I've done here is for a 500 tons per day dry paddy straw for all these projects with a 3-year payout. What are the economics? And as you can see from the top line, per ton of feed, the RCAT HTL produces the most amount of product. The capex is higher than, say, bio-CNG or just burning for electricity, but much lower than 2G ethanol. The most important parameter here is this parameter called subsidy. Since all green technologies are more expensive, this is the green premium that Mr. Gates was talking about. And if you look at the green premium, is the lowest for the RCAT HTL technology. And by the way, this is for the first plant. As we build more plants, this delta will come down. So from my perspective, from an energy resource utilization, this is the most efficient technology. The challenge here is that this will be a distributed plant, and those biocrudes will have to be brought either to the electricity generation or to refinery. And we don't have a biocrude pricing. We do have a biofuels pricing, but not for a biocrude. And this is something worth considering because that will promote wide-scale use of this technology. Now, there are many different ways that we're looking at to convert CO2, but I'm going to talk only about one because to me, this is the ultimate in sustainability. This is using algae and sunlight to convert CO2 in very large quantities. So before that, let me talk about our own development of CO2 catcher from Flue Gas. It is actually a solid adsorbent technology based on carbonate bicarbonate chemistry. And if you look at the table compared to all the conventional amine-based technologies, even the most leading technology in this field, we are far more cost effective primarily because our energy requirement to regenerate the solids is much lower compared to any liquid-based systems. And overall cost, if you look at both the capex and the opex, the same payout, we are about factor of 2 lower. So this will be a critical technology for the future when we start thinking about how to take CO2 from dilute flue gases and concentrate them for storing or transport. Now, this is a very interesting chart. This basically talks about if you have a CO2 as a circular loop, as the previous speaker talked about, then what are the best way to do it? And it basically says that if you can make fuel from CO2, then you can actually do a large quantity of CO2 recycled back and forth. And the other second best option is certainly making aggregates and construction material that previous speaker also highlighted. So let me talk about making fuels from CO2. And this is something I'm really proud of what we've done in India. So if you look at algae, essentially I'm converting sunlight and CO2 in seawater on a marginal land and converting that to a biocrude. Now we actually develop every piece of the technology in-house, and the CO2 in large quantities can be essentially converted to a fuel. So again, here the algae is converted to biocrude using the RCAT HTL technology I talked about. The technology is commercially ready, and we can commercialize today at $100 a barrel crude without subsidy, or with the subsidies available in the US and Europe, we can do it even at a $50 a barrel crude, far more competitive than the fossil crude that's available today. When I started this project, I had a vision to convert a runoff catcher into a renewable biocrude field. It is practically a wasteland where nothing grows, just the snakes and scorpions are running around. Hopefully my dream will come true one of these days. Here is a scale of our pilot plant at Gagwa, a 60-acre facility. But I think you'll get a feel for it when I play a video showing how this operation works.
Our world runs on oil, for fuel, for food, for life. For much of human history, we have relied only on 3 sources of oil: plant oils, animal fats, and petroleum to meet all of our needs. Reliance has found a 4th source in the form of a billion-year-old organism, which grows 20 to 30 times faster than food crops. and holds the key to solving the world's energy problem sustainably. Algae, the green gold. We are scaling up this technology at Gagwa, near Jamnagar, where Reliance's flagship refinery is located. Given proximity to the refinery and coastline, CO2 and seawater are available in abundance at the site. The solar irradiance is ideal for algae cultivation.
I hope this gave you some perspective of the scale of this pilot plant, if you will. What we did is we put a lot of effort into understanding fundamentals of photosynthesis. In my mind, it was very clear. All I'm converting is the sun's energy in photons to energy in a biomass. And probably we are the world leading group who understand something about photosynthesis and quantitatively figure out how to use these photons to make biomass. So we use this analysis and understanding of fundamentals of photosynthesis and kinetics to design our photobioreactors as well as our ponds. And our ponds are the most productive in the world. And as you know, photosynthesis is the basis of all life on planet Earth. So if you understand photosynthesis, you can in fact impact agriculture as well. And that's something we're doing as we speak. Just to put in perspective, what is the overall economics of this A2O process? I talked about $100 a barrel. It roughly breaks down into $50 for operating cost and $50 for CapEx at a very aggressive CapEx payout that we use in Reliance. Now, since Europe and US has subsidies, I'm trying to put together numbers to show if you were to convert the biocrude to drop-in fuels, what is the CO2 that you will reduce? And since the European Union has a requirement of more than 65% reduction to get a RED II biofuels credit of $100 a barrel. So this technology is practically risk-free to implement with the subsidies available in the US and Europe. There are no such subsidies in India. So we are talking to many big players, both in Europe and US. And one of these days, we may license this technology outside and de-risk it at somebody else's cost, if you will. Now, moving on, I guess a lot of people say, hey, why the hell the A2O makes sense? We're talking about hydrogen, we're talking about solar, we're talking about batteries, and those are all important in the basket of technology you need. But I want to show you why oil, renewable oil in particular, is so much more useful. Because oil has the highest energy and power density, as you can show from this Dragone plot on the top right-hand corner. Now, everybody agrees that the solar costs have come down and their OpEx costs today are far better than any fossil-based plants, coal-based plants, if you will. But once you start integrating the battery cost, and I'm assuming most aggressive battery cost here is less than $150 a kilowatt hour. And once you say that I need to store this energy for several days, you can all of a sudden realize that the storing the energy in oil, because I can store oil for many days, and by the way, what I'm doing here is that it's really a photon to electron. So I'm essentially burning the algae oil to make electricity in a combined heat and power plant with only 30% efficiency to make electricity. And even then you can see, if you fully cost the battery cost to ensure resiliency, reliability of a grid, because once the renewable energy on your grid goes beyond 40%, you will likely have brownouts and blackouts if you don't have sufficient energy storage. If you look at Bill Gates' book, this 15-day, 24-hour storage is not enough. You need storage for months or several months, if you will. So the batteries are good, but I guess the long term, if you think about it, the overall cost, in my opinion, converting sunlight's energy to a renewable biocrude actually has a position in these baskets of technologies. This is really direct apples to apples comparison as a way to look at and conceptually think about what exactly are we doing. Anyway, when we started this program, the crude oil prices were high and everybody was talking about CO2 tax and everything else. But in between, we had a low oil prices and there are many world leaders wondering if the climate change is real at all. And now climate change is back as a concern. And no, we need to live in this VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex. So we did diversify our ability to make various things from algae. And one of the things we did do is that we built a very strong synthetic biology capability, or basically recombinant DNA technology using CRISPR, that I can actually genetically modify algae and convert CO2 and sunlight and water to absolutely anything I want. And I've shown you a whole variety of products we're making today, but I'll elaborate on a couple of them just to give you a perspective about what is possible. So I'll talk about 2 protein products that we have developed and ready for commercialization. And there one is called super protein and other is actually iron fortified protein. And I'm quite convinced that our algae products will meet the hunger and nutrition gap in India sustainably. Our products do meet today all the technical and regulatory requirements. We are in the process of scaling up our protein production business using CO2, if you will. Now, there's these two proteins that I'm talking about. One is based on a non-GMO algae, then that we are calling it a super protein because a lot of micronutrients and other things. It is better than a soya protein. It's comparable to whey protein. It has passed through category 5 safe for human consumption, if you will. And then the other one is the iron fortified protein. This is actually a genetically modified algae. We are expressing the iron that is available in legumes in our algae protein. Just to give you a perspective, we actually consume CO2 when we make these proteins. Rest of the other products, including, for example, when we talk about non-vegetarian food, which has a significant amount of bioavailable protein, and iron protein in particular, you are emitting large quantities of CO2. So here we are going to grow protein and the food needs of India using CO2. And certainly is the most sustainable way to meet the hunger and nutrition gap in India. So this will be a big business for us. Moving on, we also make various bio-inspired products. And I'm just showing you an example of a spider silk. So look at the video on the right-hand side. So you can see we're drawing actually the fibers from a silk protein that we produce in algae. The chassis that we are modifying in algae is shown as a fairly large genetic manipulation. This is probably the largest in the world on algae to produce from CO2 a biomaterial. And as you know, spider silk is the strongest, lightweight, biodegradable, elastic material known to mankind. And you cannot harvest spiders like the silkworms. And so making this material will have a tremendous value. And I'm showing some initial products we have developed. But certainly it will have big applications in body armor, as well as for construction materials when the costs come down. So this shows the power of biology and how can you convert CO2 to various materials of very high value that are not available otherwise today. So anyway, this is my last slide. And there's a lot of stuff on this slide, but I'll just kind of give you what comes to my thought when I look at it. What I would like to point out is that note at the tagline of Mahatma Gandhi. I think Mahatma Gandhi's quote specifically mentions the word invention. I've been in India for about 10 years now, and in the Indian scientific discourse, I rarely hear emphasis on inventions, in-house Indian inventions. There's a lot of talk about different flavors of innovations. Don't get me wrong, we do need innovations, but inventions probably could help us leapfrog. Innovation to me reflects a fast follower mentality and does not show the confidence that we can develop something first to the world, flagship and show leadership. When major disruptions are on the horizon, it is an opportunity to pole vault. So why not invent in India as we're thinking about making in India? That would be my appeal to all my R&D colleagues and the technologists. From where I come from, the Indian inventions followed by innovations are absolutely critical for aspiring Indians to climb the ladder of prosperity in the era of sustainability. And also don't forget, we are entering the era of fourth industrial revolution, where biology is going to play an important role. And from my perspective, biology plays an enormous role when the climate change affects our agriculture, and we need to start adapting to the new way of life in a warmer world. So don't forget about biology. It's not just a digital technology, a few other things people are all excited about. But I'm quite confident that, as I wrote down as the bottom tagline here, what I tell my scientists is that you need to start something unknown, get into something new, and finish unforgettable. So I gave you a few examples which I think are first to the world, because many people from outside India are actually looking at our patents and approaching us for the technologies we have developed here. But they have a much bigger applicability in India if we act fast. So anyway, I'm confident that the animal spirits of young Indians are ready to be unleashed, to help propel India to glorious future. So with that, I will end, my standard message to the technical community has always been discover, develop, deploy, and most importantly, deliver societal value. It's okay to be a fast follower in many things, but just let's try to be a leader in at least a few areas where we can show that this changing landscape of sustainability and climate change, we can do something a lot better than anyone else in the world. So with that, I'll thank, I hope it was clear. So I'll stop sharing. I think you have to unmute, Ajay.
Thank you, Dr. Safre. You couldn't have had given a stronger message in an R&D conclave than this one. Focus on the inventions, the new things, rather than the innovations. Known things only to be improved. Very nice message, and the excellent examples that you have given about how our Reliance is going about doing this sustainability business. Great, great attempts to convert biomass to green hydrogen, municipal solid waste to biocrude, organic waste to biocrude, algae through sunlight to algal biocrude, and CO2 to proteins and to spider silk. All of them are excellent examples of what inventions can do. And I guess we will have them becoming successful commercially and also being taken up by the Indian industry for implementation as Reliance technology. Thank you very much for the excellent presentation. And there have been some questions. First, I will look at the ones which are specifically addressed to you, and then we can see the ones which were asked to the previous speaker, which of course you would definitely have no problem addressing as being a refinery person. One question from Dr. R.P. Verma is, what is the calorific value of biocrude produced in this process?
I think I didn't mention it, but we use a catalyst in our ARCAD HTL technology. So what happens is that it also deoxygenates in the process itself. So our calorific value debit compared to crude oil is only about 10% because our oxygen levels are very, very low. It's a very light crude that we produce, whether it is from algae or from organic waste. And by the way, we tested all kinds of waste, including bagasse, including dairy waste, animal husbandry waste. Anything that has organic content, we can tune the catalyst and get the high yields. Okay.
The next question is about the availability of biomass, which has been an issue, of course, in the context of it being used for so many of the new processes that have come out, including 2G ethanol and for the CBG production, as to what kind of capacities can people look at, or what kind of throughputs can they look at, depending on the availability of biomass.
I think that's why I just put the simple first principles concept. You don't look at the energy content of the feed and how much of that energy content goes into the useful energy content in the final product. And what I'm talking about, ARCAD HTL has the highest conversion efficiency of your energy in the feed to energy in the product. So if you have a land mass which is limited, you would rather try to look for a technology that has the highest conversion to get a big bang for your buck. Now, actually, we did a very thorough study, and early on, like about 6-7 years ago, where I went around all the way from Haryana to Madhya Pradesh to down south to Karnataka to look at all our plants and biomass availability. And we actually did a study where we went to village, taluka, and aggregated it, put up some small pilots to go figure out how do we collect, how do we densify, how do you store, because biomass is not available all throughout the year. And so if you do all that stuff, because of the Indian infrastructure, the radius on which you can collect is smaller than, for example, in the US or Europe. But the cost of biomass roughly turns out to be the same, whether it's in US, here, or whatever it is. Today, we are sourcing it, and we are putting it in our boilers and gasifiers and so on and so forth. We are putting up a large demo plant for our biomass to hydrogen activity. So I'm not too concerned, because really the issue is the business model. And how do you make sure there is a value proposition for everybody in the game? So you need to promote the local entrepreneurs at a local village and a taluka level. You need to have a densification and storage, but this is all sorted out. I mean, this can be done. I don't see that as a big challenge.
Thank you. There is one question concerning what should academics or people in academics should do to develop their skills in CCUS. Any advice to them?
Actually, CCUS, if you think about it, if you're just storing it underground, it's really a cost. And as I said before, in my previous company, I was involved in CCUS at Sleipner, the first project ever in the world, when Norway imposed $20 a ton CO2 tax. And the beauty is that if you look at the energy production, like for example, coal-based plants and how much electricity would cost go up, it's not really that. It does go up, but it's not something that is going to break the bank in terms of the overall world's GDP. If the world wants to do it, we can do it. The issue is not that. The issue is that we're trying to build experience to make sure there's no unintended consequences about release of CO2 if something happens. I mean, if you don't have it in a tight reservoirs or you have a big earthquake, what would happen? Those kinds of things. But now we have built experience over almost 30, 40 years, so we know how to do it. And oil industry knows how to take stuff, carbon out of the ground and put it up. So we have skills to put it back in ground as well. So I think what I would suspect is that in India, what we need to do is first understand I don't know whether we've done a thorough assessment of our saline aquifers and their availability and how close are they to CO2 sources. That's the first thing we should do. How far are these saline aquifers relative to the water tables and few other things. And also learn from others, because there has been a lot of activity at some level for almost 40 years, and oil industry has been doing this and learning from it. So I think this is something we can partner with others as well. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Now, in terms of academia, I think what I would suspect is that see, the underground upstream business is very peculiar because it's not unlike other fields where you can do experimentation, right? And so you need to understand the local geology, the rheology of whatever fluids that are flowing. So this is really a perfect for a scientist to go figure out, how do I lower the cost? Because when I work in upstream, my experience was we always invested in below the ground and under-invested in above the ground. In almost all the cases, the constraints were above the ground, not below the ground. And so actually we developed some methodology to optimize the capex and horizon on which you're going to invest so that it's optimal both above the ground and below the ground. And these turn out to be extremely complex, large-scale mathematical optimization problems when you're coupling the reservoir with these above ground facilities. So again, new algorithms, new way of looking at things is something academia can help. And certainly the whole petrophysics, the geology, everything else. I'm sure there are more experts than me. I haven't been in this business for almost 20 years, 25 years. But it's something I'm sure academia can contribute. But see, my single message to academia is that two things I kind of talk about. One is that you must absolutely focus on fundamentals and don't follow anybody else. Just challenge the status quo and say, where are the boundaries and how am I going to go beyond the boundaries? Because all disruptions are beyond the boundaries. And that you need to have a fundamental understanding of science, engineering, and economics, and some common sense. And that is not something we teach in our education. And the second message I'm giving these days is that don't teach the students on our past. It is immaterial. Tell them the fundamentals and teach them the skills to learn, unlearn, and relearn as the time changes, because the world is going to change so fast. If you are not agile in thinking and fast in execution, we'll be left behind. And I talked quite a bit about the fourth industrial revolution. India missed all three of them previously. I have to be blunt with you. And if you're not careful, we'll miss the fourth one as well. So this is an opportunity for the academia to go figure out how are we going to educate the students for the future, and not in a narrow, very pedagogical way in some ways that they can be expert in certain things. You need a multidisciplinary approach. You need an expert in many things. I mean, I didn't know biology a damn thing about it until somebody gave me an algae problem. And the very first thing that came to me was it has nothing to do with the biology, it has to do with the photons. If I don't understand photosynthesis, all this stuff that is going on worldwide is completely garbage. It's like you have a one-trick pony, you do something, So it is a very complex problem. It has photons, it has biology, it has water movement, it has agriculture, it has the predators chasing your algae all the time. I think probably we're the only guys in the world who have been running algae large-scale ponds for 4 or 5 years without crashes. With monsoon, with winter, whatever the hell happens, we've been able to figure it out. And that is because it takes a lot of fundamental work to understand biology. We did a lot of work on genetics to understand which genes are overexpressed, which genes are underexpressed. What do I need to do to make this thing work? So I think I'll focus on the fundamentals and not on just some fast follower, read the paper and do some incremental work. Sorry about the bluntness, but at my age, I can be blunt.
Well, thanks a lot, sir. Just one last question. Safety and security of CO2 geologic sequestration technology. Is it something you would like to comment on briefly?
I think this is something we absolutely must not need to learn, because this is, you have to understand, oil industry is very, very cautious and conservative, right? And although we've been doing it at some scale for 40 years, no one has really jumped on and say, okay, we'll do it at very, very large scale. You know, my previous employer came and talked about to the Biden administration that they can take all the CO2 on a Houston channel, but they need $100 billion to ensure that they can put all the CO2 and go to zero. Obviously, part of it was politics and other things, but they do have technology. It's not that they cannot do it. Without some carbon price, why would you do it? I mean, without a CO2 tax, there's no incentive to take the CO2, concentrate it and put it under the ground. And the main issue is that just like the gas hydrates, people have been working on it for 40 plus years, is the risk. And so now the experience, there's sufficient experience in my mind that people know how to do it safely and mitigate the risk of unintended CO2 release.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I think we can go on and on.
Actually, the other big opportunity in the Indian context is really basalt, because we have a huge basalt formations, and then one could sequester a large amount of CO2 in basalt, essentially making a construction material underground, if you will. And that is a far safer way of storing CO2 than other means.
Other means. Okay. Thanks a lot. There was one outstanding question from the previous speaker, which we thought we will address it to you. Would you like to touch upon that also?
I think scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, I'm sure
Yes.
Indian Oil is far more equipped to handle it. Well, my answers will be a bit more radical.
Okay.
So I would rather do something that is practical, that immediately we can follow. You know?
Okay. Thanks a lot. Maybe it can
But
be.
I mean, I guess that the simple thing is very simple. Okay. I mean, I'll put in one word. You know, we have developed a technology to convert crude oil directly to petrochemicals without fuels. I can convert any hydrocarbon in refinery today to more than 75% petrochemicals with no fuel. Right? And so we are aggressively pursuing it. We will convert the Jamnagar refinery as the fuel demand goes down to petrochemical building blocks. And in that particular technology, there's no one in the world is anywhere close to us. So I feel quite confident. I mean, we are more deliberate about putting it on the ground because when the need arises, we are ready to do it, if you will. So basically, we can sequester CO2 in the materials we would make, whether they're carbon materials or composite materials or even polymers, because we also develop technology for polymer recycling back to oil, if you will. So again, like we are trying to do CO2 recycle with algae. So if we convert all the hydrocarbons to materials, which are recyclable, the problem goes away from my perspective. Because then you'll have hydrogen and a few other things to look at decarbonizing steel, cement, mobility, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But the most important thing in my mind is really converting our core resources with CCS using the catalytic acid I talked about and reduce our energy import. That's something we, I think what happens in India is since nobody has done it, we are somewhat reluctant, but we have demonstrated a fairly large scale pilot plan. And so I think Dr. Saraswat is warming up to the idea that this technology is worth pursuing for further scale up.
Okay.
But this is like a national mission project. We are not a coal, I mean, we are not in a coal business and Reliance has no coal, right?
Yes. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. We can go on and on listening to you, but we have to also listen to some other topics of equal interest. The next one is Professor A.V. Pandit, who is going to talk about opportunities in Indian energy sector, the urban and rural sectors. Professor Pandit He is Vice Chancellor of the Institute of Chemical Technology, the erstwhile UDCT at Bombay. He's a graduate from IIT-BHU and a PhD from the University Department of Chemical Technology. And he has worked in the Department of Chemical Engineering at Cambridge, where he has been a research associate with Professor Davidson. Today, he has
I think it's enough, Ajay.
No.
You don't bother about it.
Well, I will just briefly read out your awards and the important ones out of them.
It's fine.
Fellow of the Maharashtra Academy of Sciences, a very significant achievement, I would say. Professor Rajadaksha Best Teacher Award, IICHE Hadialia Chemicals Award, Distinguished Alumnus of the ICT, INSA Best Teacher Award, and Vishwakarma Medal of the INSA. So over to you, Professor Pandit.
Thank you, Dr. Deshpande. Let me just share my. Are you able to see my slides?
Yes, now.
Okay, let me just make it full screen.
One thing I wanted to mention, Professor Pandit, before you begin, is about your work in hydrodynamic cavitation.
Yeah,
I had identified that to be mentioned, and I'll
that's okay.
touch upon that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
He is instrumental in starting major activity in the area of hydrodynamic cavitation for intensification of physical and chemical processing applications, and has successfully exploited the cavitation phenomena for a variety of operations such as crystallization, emulsification, nanoparticle synthesis, and processes such as esterification, oxidation, etc. Over to you now.
Yeah, thank you, Ajay. It was an outstanding presentation by Ajit, and he really touched upon the reality. And what is most important, the point which he made it out, is carbon capture and utilization is still the end of the pipe solution. Whenever we teach pollution control, we say that we must tackle it at source, and reducing carbon consumption or carbon consumption based fuel itself is going to be our biggest challenge. So capturing carbon, in my opinion, is again a low-hanging fruit. We must utilize the energy and without sacrificing the growth of the nation which we are looking out for.
Absolutely.
In my presentation, I'm going to talk about the growth and energy requirement, which is obvious. So I'm going to give some statistics related to those. What are the opportunities and what people have already explored? What are the compulsions as an Indian technological company or Indian technological scene? What are the compulsions on us? Then I'll briefly talk about the efforts which are going on in ICT. And then I'll talk about a concept where we are trying to put up the national metabolism. It's like whenever you're using resources, you use food. If the food is not utilized properly, if your metabolism is low, then you tend to accumulate that particular food, which gets reflected in terms of increase in the weight without getting utilized, so on and so forth. So similarly, depending upon the nation's metabolism, there is a resource utilization efficiency, and we'll try to draw certain conclusions looking at. So I'm going to propose a methodology by which the national metabolism can be estimated. So these are some of the statistics which we need to understand, and I'm sure the previous two speakers have also touched upon these things. So we can. And you will find that because I have used it from different sources, the units are not necessarily SI units. You will find that people are in a position to understand that. People who work in the area of petrochemicals always talk in terms of BTUs, or people who work in the area of electricity will always talk in terms of kilowatt hours. Anyway, the point which I'm trying to make out here is the growth in which, and I have made two specific categorization, is one, OECD countries and non-OECD countries. So there are 38 OECD countries which have decided to work together in terms of cooperation, in terms of economic cooperation for development purposes. And if you see the consumption rate, if you are not part of OECD, is significantly higher as compared to those who are in OECD. That means the technologies which are being developed are being shared, and these technologies are being distributed, as a result of which they are in a much better control in terms of meeting the challenges of global warming or temperature increase, which we are aiming for. So the categorization, you will see that there are different types of, unfortunately, what is happening is economic growth rate in non-OECD countries is significantly higher as compared to the growth rate, GDP growth rate in developed countries or members of OECD. And they are the ones who are using these more efficiently as compared to ours. So we need to grow at significantly higher rate to improve the standard of living. But that is also going to add, and that is why this debate which comes about and was discussed at COP26 in Glasgow to a significant level, mainly because there were, let's say, allegations on part of the countries which were part of OECD that imposing conditions on us when they have reached a particular standard, so that we would not be in a position to reach those standards. Anyway, besides that, we need to understand the real logistics behind it and real reasons behind this. So let's move on and see the kind of how growth in terms of GDP and the energy consumptions have increased. This again shows the history and the projections and a sort of a distribution in terms of renewables and other energy sources which have been utilized 2020 and the kind of projections which are used or which are predicted using this. Let me just adjust this somewhere because it is blocking. Okay, right. So natural gas, nuclear. See, nobody has touched upon nuclear so far, but I'll briefly touch upon it towards the end of my talk. So we keep on looking at the statistics and we learn something out of it. So I'm not going to talk much about the statistical part of it, but just to make you aware of the trends which are there. What I want to focus on in due course of time is what is the effort which we need to put in, and what are the efforts and activities which have been performed at ICT, and how these activities can be scaled up to be able to understand whatever Dr. Safre talked about in terms of conversions, inventions and innovations are absolutely true. I couldn't agree with him more in terms of the teaching which is required and the learning, relearning, learning, de-learning and relearning procedure which we talked about is absolutely essential for all of us academics to get into the habit rather than just clearing the exams and getting good CGPAs, because that is not going to serve the purpose. Ultimately, when they start practicing in an industry, they realize that CGPA was only useful for entering into an industry. Later on, what they are able to do and innovate is what's going to matter. So these are, again, if you see the distribution of energy consumption in terms of OECD and non-OECD, basic chemicals, food, iron and steel, non-ferrous metals, non-metallic minerals, paper, all the resources we are, and to what extent that the energy utilization in terms of mass or in terms of calorific value, which has been used to run these industries successfully. But if you consider this now and consider the projections, if you continue to rapidly reduce the CO2 emissions, and this is what is expected, if you continue the net non-zero activities, obviously you will be in a position to reduce the emissions significantly. And if you continue with the business as such, with a better efficiency improvement, better efficiencies, you have to keep in mind the Jevons paradox in this particular case. You try to improve the efficiency, the consumption increases. So rather than at the end of the day, when you see that you have improved the efficiency with an objective of reducing the consumption, because it is now been made more efficient, people tend to consume it more, because now you are getting a car which gives you 20 kilometers per liter or 25 kilometers per liter. More consumption takes place. At the end of the day, you realize that indeed you have not been able to conserve or reserve or improve in terms of total consumption of the energy. So this again are extension of what I have talked about. So the variation, the global primary needs, rapid, net zero, these are the three categories which have been there. And again, these have been expressed in terms of either bar chart or in terms of graphs indicating the trends which are there. And I think the earlier two speakers, including Ajit as well as Mr. Trivedi, did talk about these issues. So this again shows you where we are. We are located somewhere, if you can see my We are located somewhere here in terms of GDP per capita as compared to the countries which are fairly developed, low income, lower middle income, upper middle, and high income. And you will find that the annual electricity consumption, how it is inherently linked with the growth of any country or GDP of any country. This is again an extension of our objective has always been the improvement in the living standards. These living standards cannot be increased or cannot be improved without the usage or increased consumption of electricity, or for that matter, energy. Because energy and growth as well as energy and GDP are inherently linked. We have this distribution of different forms of energy. And unfortunately, I think you should see a very nice article which is written by Dr. Kakodkar, as well as 2 articles written by Professor Yadav as well as Professor Pangarkar on nuclear options available as well as green hydrogen, which are fairly revealing in terms of what strategies India can adopt in terms of meeting the challenge or commitment which we have made during the COP26 meeting. So energy and global warming are inherently linked. Energy consumption versus standard of living. If you look at the graph on the right-hand side, it is fairly obvious that if you want to improve the standard of living, it has to be in association or in conjunction with the increased demand of energy or increased utilization of energy. So ultimately, we must ask ourselves the question is why everything is related to energy. Now, in reality, it is not energy, but it is actually materials, and every material or the product or the item which we produce does involve energy. So ultimately, every activity which we get involved in is linked with energy. And we will see, if you just consider the Indian oil's production and consumption, these are dated values, but in terms of consumption, in fact, it hasn't changed. In fact, from 70% imported, we have reached 80% imported, only 80% imported. And our share has in fact reduced from 30% local indigenous to 20%. There are many socio-political reasons for that. I don't want to comment on that, but these are the trends which we need to do. This again is a sort of a breakup, and we are very near that. You consider chemicals, nutraceuticals, biotechnology, food processing, food preservation, energy. Now, what Dr. Safre said is extremely true. We must look at the photosynthesis, and the currently photosynthesis which is happening is in terms of converting the solar incident energy in the form of fixing it in the form of biomass. But the efficiency of the standard biomass or standard photosynthesis is hardly in the range of about 0.4%, 0.5%. What Dr. Safre was talking about is the target of algae. And if we are able to increase this photosynthesis efficiency, as he correctly pointed out, by looking at the process of photosynthesis and a photon efficiency, if we increase it to 4.5%, that is, let's say by an order of magnitude, the entire scenario is going to change. And that is what he was aiming for, that starting as such algal photosynthesis efficiencies are significantly higher as compared to the standard biomass which is grown on soil. So if you are able to capture that, and if you get biomass with photosynthesis efficiency an order of magnitude higher, instead of 0.3, 0.4%, you get it to 4%, you can change the entire scenario. So I am not at all surprised when Dr. Safre made those projections in terms of the future, in terms of biocrude as a future for a future fuel. So you look at the energy requirement versus growth, you can see this, and it just reconfirms the whole, and how the prices have been changing. Again, these are statistics which we need to look at. Starting from 20 rupees, now we have gone down to almost 4.5, 5 rupees, at the most 6 rupees in terms of solar power or wind power. But they are all requiring again a storage. Now this storage, if you incorporate into it, the cost significantly goes up. And Dr. Safre also mentioned about the inclusion of batteries in terms of storing it. So I fully agree with him that storing the energy in the form of oil is much better option as compared to storing it instead of in the form of a battery. So this is a sort of a distribution which is taking place. So where do we stand at what we can do? Now, if you look at the wind, hydropower, biomass, bagasse, urban waste, which we also talked about, industrial waste, what is the potential and where do we stand? This is 2008 old, but it just tells you that we haven't really progressed significantly. Even though people have talked about municipal solid waste as a resource, only recently things have started moving in the form of valorization of these particular energy options. So let me just move on. So the one which I already talked about, the Exergy. Now this is the term which I'm going to talk about and which I'm going to use it again and again. People talk in terms of energy in the form of enthalpy only. It is not enough for us to actually talk in terms of energy. It is necessary for us to talk in terms of Exergy, which is essentially in the second law thermodynamic sense, meaning we need to look at the useful form of energy. Now I'll consider the deficiency of Exergy in due course of time. And I have already discussed about the conversion efficiency in terms of photosynthesis. If you consider 0.6% and you increase it by an order of magnitude, what is going to be the biomass efficiencies, generation efficiencies which you are going to get? We use this biomass and you burn the biomass with 30% efficiency to convert it into electricity. You multiplied 0.3 into 0.6. Ultimately, the entire photonic energy which is falling on Earth, if you want to convert it into electricity, we are going to be in a position to convert it only to with 0.18%. 0.18%. Now, if you look at solar energy, solar photovoltaic, again, storage comes into picture, but they're talking about efficiencies with at least 15% conversion efficiency. And even if you consider it as 1/4, so 15 divided by 4, almost 4% as compared to 0.18%. So still it is extremely attractive in terms of solar. But whatever resources which you are going to use these or to make these solar panels, to absorb the energy, to use that particular energy, to transmit all that energy, these resources consumption needs to be looked at. And that is why I said metabolism in terms of resource utilization needs to be looked into very seriously. So these are some calculations which indicate, which already have discussed. Now I'm going to talk about what is the land area which is required. So land area, you convert it into sea area. If it is possible for you to grow algae in a controlled form, as has been done in Reliance, near coastal region, it's very difficult to have it coastal regions because of the pollution. It's extremely difficult to maintain the conditions which are required for the algal growth, which is expected, the kind of numbers which Dr. Safre talked about. It is possible for you to maintain it or to get it only under controlled atmosphere or controlled conditions in terms of nutrients, in terms of pollutants, and the predatory microorganisms which you talked about. So these are the sort of a distribution. So if you are able to get to 4.5% photosynthetic efficiency from current 0.4%, only 1.5% of the land mass of India is sufficient for us to grow the biomass, which will meet all our energy requirement in the form of calorific value. So what are those calorific values which we are talked about, right? And what are the options which are available for us to utilize this biomass? Whenever you say biomass, essentially we are using carbon neutral fuel. So we are not adding any carbon. And that's why I said in the beginning that rather than looking at end of the pipe solution, we must be looking at the source itself and see whether it is possible for us to change the source. So you have anaerobic digestion, you have gasification, and I think many technologies are being developed, are being talked about. Professor Pant also has many technologies related to biomass conversion, whether it is torrefaction, pyrolysis, and a significant amount of work is going on, which is it. So biomass as an energy source. Now, where are the energy consumptions as far as Indian context is concerned? And I will talk about this in a bit more detail. Forget about this. This is 2G ethanol, not relevant. So if you want to compare the standard in terms of energy consumption in a country like China, we require about 450 million hectares of land to grow biomass, assuming that 10 tons of biomass per hectare per year is grown. Standard, if you can improve the photosynthesis efficiency, it can be increased to 30 tons. So India's total land mass is 300. Even if you want to use USA, it will reach 4,100 million hectares. We don't have that kind of a land mass. So without having to increase the photosynthetic efficiency, we don't have sufficient biomass itself to be able to convert it into fuel, meeting all our fuel requirements and meeting the carbon neutrality which we are aiming for. So again, in terms of biomass, direct burning, gasification, liquefaction, bioethanol, biodiesel, and I will talk about direct burning, which is what is happening in most of the cases. Unfortunately, direct burning is happening at such low efficiencies, and these efficiencies rarely exceed 10 to 12%. In what it means that only 10 to 12% of the actual calorific value of the biomass gets transferred into power. Only 10 to 12%. Why 10 to 12%? Even if you use a bagasse boiler, because of the ability to combust a solid material, which is very similar to coal. Coal is being pulverized and then you get higher efficiencies. Biomass cannot be transferred in the pulverized form, so it needs to be pelleted. So when you pellet it, it's like a thick, large coal blocks which are being burned, and the burning efficiencies are significantly less.
Yes.
Right? So as a result of which, if I want to talk about consumption of energy, and you broadly talk about three modes of energy consumption: industry, transport sector, agriculture to a certain extent, and for cooking purposes. India has a 16% of world population, 16% of world population, and everybody needs at least 2 square meals. Indian cooking processes are very elaborate, thermally extremely inefficient, and we operate it with using pressure cooker. Even if we use pressure cooker, every pressure cooker is operated as a whistle cooker. Nobody understands what the objective of a pressure cooker. Every time the whistle is allowed to go, you're losing on 10% thermal efficiency. It is necessary for us to train people, and you see every cook and cookery shows, they will talk at that you give 5 whistles, you give 3 whistles, you give 4 whistles. Instead of talking about the time which is required for you to maintain the temperature of cooking, people talk in terms of number of whistles. It is promoting inefficient cooking practices, which I feel is extremely important for people to be educated. And unfortunately, 85% of the biomass is used in cooking. India uses 40% of its national energy, and number can vary depending upon the way you calculate it. 26% to 40% of the total India's energy consumption goes in cooking alone. In terms of industry, it is about 25%. In terms of agriculture, it's about 20%. In terms of electricity, but 26 to 40% of the pie of this entire cake has not been addressed at all. And it needs to be addressed because you have a huge potential in terms of saving. And fortunately, it is being used using biomass, as a result of which we say it's carbon neutral, doesn't matter. But in terms of losing productive time, we are significantly inefficient in terms of operation. So these are the different techniques of combustion of solid fuel biomass stoves which have been developed. And the geometry we need to understand. Again, I'll go back to what Dr. Safre talked about. The fundamental needs to be addressed. Now, once you understand the fundamentals, you find out the rate controlling step, you find out the activities which are happening out there, you would be in a position to design much better and highly efficient systems. So these are some pictures indicating how these efficiency improvement. So fundamentals is the process of how the entire solid fuel combustion occurs. This has been modeled, it has been published, and has been validated as well. So we need to understand how the ignition front moves, so you can match with the model and confirm the validity of the model. This is the final product which is there. Now, along with this, you need to have a cooking, right? You can't just burn the solid fuel and then expect it to get cooked. So you need to match it with the cooker as well. And then we go back to our basic chemical engineering principles: optimum heat flux, reduction in the heat loss to the surroundings, that is an optimum flame to vessel ratio, early shut off of the heat supply, and multiple effect evaporation. You combine all this and you can see how efficiently the average cooking efficiency, even if you take ISI standard, they say that the burner should have an efficiency of 60% thermal efficiency. You combine the stove along with the cooker, this is just a prototype, and the final product is here. can get it to 60 to 70%. Imagine 24% increase to 70%. Naturally, you have saved almost 60% of the energy which you would have used otherwise. So you need to address that, and you want to cook large, consider midday meal scheme of our country. You can think, so you need to understand the kinetics of cooking. Simple experiment. This is what I talk about innovation. This is rice grain. As the rice grain gets cooked, you find how the cooking is progressing. The unclear, the not translucent part is the cooked portion, and the opaque portion is the uncooked portion. You can do image analysis, and based on image analysis, you can write a nice kinetic model in terms of kinetic of the cooking. You can do this also for dal or lentils or whatever it is. You match it, and you can now understand which are the rate controlling steps which are involved in the cooking. Once you understand that, then you can address that particular issue in the design of a cooker which you make, in the design of a stove which needs to supply the required quantum of energy. So you can also convert it into a continuous cooker. This is again a final model which currently is being operated at Dr. Baba Amte's ashram, cooking food for the
Inmates.
students there. Right. So this is a brief conclusion which I'll talk about. Vast unutilized land is available, and opportunities are developed new technologies. Now I will come back to national's metabolism, maybe 5 or 7 minutes. I'll finish it off.
Yeah.
Increasing population, economic growth, diminishing fossil fuel resources, overwhelming concern about environment, circular economy, all these niche areas which people are talking about, or people are talking about attending these conferences, so on and so forth. But what is most important is nobody is looking at the thermodynamic efficiency of resource utilization. And this is what I want to talk about. The resource utilization cannot be only on the basis of first law, that is the energy conservation law. You need to also look at the second law of thermodynamics, and we need to look at exergetic analysis or exergetic efficiency. Now, Dr. Safre also talked about the randomness which is there in terms of weather, so on and so forth. That is a classic example of increase in the entropy of the system, the randomness associated with it. And the loss in the Exergy efficiency or destruction in Exergy, which means not effective utilization of the resource, is increasing the entropy, and that increase in the entropy results into these unpredictable sources, because entropy is associated with chaos, right? So climate change, global warming, increased number of floods, drought, they are directly or indirectly related to the environmental emissions that is essentially associated with the loss in the exergetic efficiency. What we can do, what we have done is, for the past 4 decades of India, we have monitored this, or we have collected the data and done the analysis and presented in 4 different sectors, right? First attempt to analyze the complex flow of all resources in various sectors of India using thermodynamic Exergy analysis, pinpointing the areas of major deficiencies, and then we have compared it with the developed societies in terms of how, as India, our metabolism is as compared to some of the developed countries. So these are largest economy. I'm not going to talk about that. Traditional focus is on economic development, and studies of national metabolism has just been started. We published this particular work way back in 2014, and now it is now picking it up. Terry has picked it up, and we have collaborative work which is going on with the outside universities, mainly Ohio University from USA. So we have identified economic sectors which has a great improvement potential. And I said at the beginning as well, improvement in efficiency doesn't necessarily mean reduction in the consumption. It can improve the efficiency, but you need to understand that efficiency needs to be improved to such an extent that you do not face Jevons paradox. So resource flow needs to be modeled. Each sector was further divided into energy utilization components, fuel and non-fuel minerals, energy and Exergy flow. Exergy definition is same as that of energy in terms of the units are also same, which is essentially kilocalories. And Exergy is available in different form. Is a physical form in terms of temperature gradient, or chemical form in the form of a fuel, or it can be in the form of a pressure. So you get total Exergy delta H, T delta S, summation of xi when you get converted kinetic Exergy and potential Exergy. So you need to consider this, and Exergy is the utilization or utilizable energy content of resource. That is, you may have the same enthalpy, but let's say 540 kilocalories worth of 1 kg of steam is more useful as compared to 540 kilocalories associated with the water which is available to you at 40 degrees centigrade. Can't do much with water available to you at 40 degrees centigrade, but you can definitely do something with 1 kg of steam having 540 kilocalories associated with it. So the quality of energy needs to be taken into account. It cannot be just compared only on the energy basis or enthalpy basis. All right, so these are the physical Exergy definitions, thermal Exergy definition. What we have tried to do is natural resources are traditionally divided into energy resources and other resources. Now, this distinction is not very meaningful because it doesn't take into account the exergetic utilization of those resources into final product. So nations which follow a path of lower second law thermodynamic efficiency are eventually going to face the problem of sustainability, with which Dr. Safre started his lecture. So you look at the total electricity generated, the different types of electricity generation which has taken place. So if you consider utility sector, electricity generation which has taken place, in what form the electricity has been using what fuel the electricity has been generated, coal, hydro, natural gas, diesel, light diesel, furnace oil, so on and so forth. And what are the exergetic efficiencies of usage of this? You can see it from here itself. Hydro is the most exergetically efficient and others are less so. You can represent this in the form of a Grassmann diagram. The red portion is the rejected Exergy and the pink portion is the useful work. And you can take a ratio of this and you would be in a position to understand how these utility sector has been effectively utilizing their resources. You can similarly look at industry sector, do the same heating, lighting, mechanical drive application. You can do a similar analysis for this, and you can also do electricity, coal, lignite, mineral, natural gas, naphtha, diesel, furnace oil, and you see the efficiency. You will again see that in terms of this almost 40% efficiency, Exergy efficiency with which the industry sector is working, which is very good. But you look at the transport sector, and since we depend a lot on the diesel, you will realize that transport sector is one of the least efficient in terms of Exergy utilization, or most, let's say, culprit in terms of Exergy destruction. You can combine all this. So let me put the last, residential and commercial sector, and you will find this is what is residential and commercial. You can combine all these energy utilization resources and put, this is agriculture sector, again, fairly efficient because mechanized agriculture is not so much as such, as a result of which you find that it's almost 50% Exergy efficiently which is used. So you can combine all this and you can see what is the Exergy efficiency of our nation. That is the metabolism of our country. We are working at 20-25% Exergy efficiency, and we are almost 80% of the useful energy is being rejected, is being wasted, and that is definitely contributing to the increase in entropy. Increasing entropy means chaos, means unpredictable weather, means floods and disasters, so on and so forth. So there is an explanation available for this, and we must consciously look at this. So this is again, and you compare it now with India versus all the other countries, compare the societies, and you find where India is in terms of Exergy efficiencies as compared to Exergy destruction as compared to others. This is coal, comparison of coal Exergy input as a share of total, crude, similar. You can combine all this and you can see comparison of natural gas and CO2 emissions. You will find wherever you are using system resources less Exergy efficiently, it is resulting into more CO2 emissions per fuel ton of fuel consumption. So I'd like to conclude that India is following the traditional developmental path with heavy dependence on fossil fuel. Exergy analysis has been found out most appropriate measure for resource assessment and also to address the issues of sustainability. Residential sector, only 30% is the least Exergy efficient, followed by transport 22%, followed by utility 33%, agriculture is almost 50%, and coal fuel thermal power generation is the largest contributor to total CO2 emissions. And I would just request you to read Dr. Kakodkar's article in how nuclear in Indian context is likely to be significantly useful. So average Exergy efficiency for electricity generation has continued to decrease, with the share of coal increasing. The Exergy utilization efficiency 24 to 45%. Results show that 80% of the high quality energy extracted from earth is wasted. Right? Picojoules per rupee decrease in the energy intensity, but at the same time, there are certain areas which has shown and given us a direction how it can necessarily be improved upon. I would just like to rest my case out here and then leave it to you for any questions which you may have, which will make an attempt to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pandit, for giving us a very different and a very novel, unique way of looking at resources utilization and looking at the issue of carbon capture or energy efficiency in a different quantitative way of measurement, that is exergy analysis or thermodynamic efficiency of resource utilization.
Can I make a couple of comments, Ajay, before you take the questions?
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, I guess I did not really emphasize on the algae part of photosynthetic efficiency, but we are running our ponds without crashes for more than 4+ years, and our average efficiency is close to 7% photosynthesis.
Brilliant, brilliant.
You know, photobioreactors, which are needed for my genetically modified algae to make these fancy products, my photosynthesis efficiency in the lab is close to 18%.
Excellent.
And in a scaled up systems, which will deploy commercially, is close to 12%. So if you look at the photosynthetic efficiencies that we have achieved and demonstrated,
phenomenal.
And that's why my economics are so much better than anybody.
Absolutely, I can fully understand, Ajit.
I'm really proud of my team in actually understanding and developing kinetics of photosynthesis on a photon to energy basis of end products, right? Now, other thing is that certainly compared to PV, even at a say 12 to 13% photosynthetic efficiency, because I use a different part of spectrum, right? And the orientation of the sun and for PV versus algae is somewhat different. But one thing in my mind is that you can actually combine the algae production with solar panels. Because if you look at the China and the Europe and many other countries, they're actually doing agriculture below solar panels, right?
Yeah.
And so there's nothing that says I cannot grow algae for landmass efficiency and combine the two to effectively use the limited land. And by the way, your calculations are correct. I mean, we are not that limited if I can get the photosynthetic efficiency up. And I'm quite convinced that, by the way, the understanding of photosynthesis and all the genetics, you put a lot of effort in understanding C3 plants, C4 plants, algae being a C3 plant, and what quantifies the whole efficiency of conversion of photons to various products with the carbohydrates, proteins, this and other things.
Yes, yeah.
And which genes are actually affected. So what we did is we took a rice genome for about 3,000 varieties in the world, combined that with all the algae omics technology we have developed in everything, right? And then we applied the most advanced, we had to develop our own AI or genetic algorithms, if you will, or the neural nets, if you will, to decipher, because my aim is that I need to connect the genotype to phenotype, and obviously the work is still needed. And this is another challenge to the scientific community is that
yes, indeed.
Instead of just applying these algorithms that exist for pattern recognition and pattern filling, which are very useful for making commercial value, don't get me wrong, and providing services to the masses. But if you want to get the science to be pushed further and actually assess a new way of looking at things, is a perfect opportunity for Indian scientists, as you were asking me before, on understanding the new ways of developing algorithms to decipher the beauty of life.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you have a better control of a genotype to phenotype, you can do everything. You can do agriculture, you can do energy, you can do human well-being, whatever the hell you want to do. And that's a real area. And I really like your Exergy analysis. I mean, if you can
We
send me
can
your
be
paper.
discussing 100 years from now if we get all those.
I don't think so. You need 100 years. I'm quite confident if
No,
you put
no.
our minds, so we can
You
do it.
and me would be discussing after 100 years, even then.
I don't think I will be around that long. Probably you will.
No, that's what I'm saying. You can be around. That's what I mean. If you get all the answers.
No, I understand that. But I think for human life, it's far more complex. I mean,
Yes,
you know,
it is.
I
Yes,
quite a
it
bit
is.
about the fact that the biochemistry and chemistry is no different. The only thing is the damn genes monkey around with the chemical pathways in unknown ways well, for a variety of factors. So that's something we need to understand. Anyway,
Thanks a
sorry
lot.
about.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, sir. It's been a very interesting discussion and an interesting talk. There are a few questions, Professor Pandit, but since we don't have much time, we have two speakers waiting.
Yeah,
I'll leave it to the to you to handle this question directly. Just one question, one observation I would like to ask you. You presented the Exergy analysis of living standards or living lifestyle or whatever in terms of that efficiency factor for different countries. And you showed that India is much inferior compared to the others in terms of these parameters. Now, what is it that's really contributing to this? I mean, it's not just industry related data, it's a general social data of.
Yes. In fact, if you find that the least Exergy efficiency is residential sector, which includes the cooking energy.
Yes.
In fact, the industry sector and agricultural sector, because even now agricultural sector has only 50% Exergy efficiency, and that mainly because we still rely on the monsoon. We still do not have a mechanized agriculture as is existing in other parts. We have a mechanized agriculture, drip irrigation everywhere. That Exergy efficiency can also be significantly improved.
Okay.
What it clearly indicates that we have identified the opportunities where there is a huge scope for improvement. And one of that is the residential sector in whatever way. So you have solar panels, you have efficient cooking practices, and that is definitely going to contribute to the improved Exergy efficiency of these operations.
Just one observation made by Dr. Malhotra, I would like to put before you. He has mentioned that 2005 biomass for cooking data, which you showed, has changed substantially with the Ujjwala scheme of LPG penetration. So I would mean that it be much more efficient by way of utilization.
No, I think that the number which I talked about, that almost 80% of the people still are using biomass for cooking purposes, that may have significantly changed because people shifting to gas. LPG gas. But when they shift to LPG, the efficiencies of cooking has not improved. They are only using the fuel
different fuel
efficiently, where the fuel the stove itself works more efficiently.
Okay.
That's all.
But the cooking standards and cooking norms have not changed. That's why the efficiency factor
Till our celebrity cooks start talking in terms of thermal efficiency, talking about number of whistles, things are not going to change.
Not going to change. Okay. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Professor Pandit. Thanks a lot, Dr. Safre, for having given such a detailed observation. And now we move to the next speaker, Mr. Dr. Debashish Bhattacharjee. Dr. Debashish Bhattacharjee is a metallurgical engineer and is a PhD in material science from the University of Cambridge, and has subsequent postdoctoral research engagements at Rolls-Royce University and Cambridge. He is today, he joined Tata Steel R&D in 1996 as Chief Research Development Officer. And in his current role, he is leading the development of technologies in areas where ready solutions do not exist, like large-scale carbon capture and utilization in steel industry, production of green hydrogen in large scale for replacing carbon-based reduction of iron ore, utilization of low-grade ores, development of novel coating on steel. He is the chairman of Expert Committee on Industry Academia Connect Task Force, Bengal Chamber of Commerce. He is a member of Technology Advisory Group for Empowered Technology Group, Government of India. And at Tata Steel, he currently holds the position of Vice President Technology and New Materials. So it's over to you, Dr. Bhattacharjee.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can. Topic of your presentation, just to make people aware, is CCU implementation in steel plants, a case study of Tata Steel.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you very much for your kind invitation to the R&D Conclave. Good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
It's an absolute pleasure to be here. So without wasting any more time, let me start on my topic of the day, which is CCU, which is carbon capture, utilization, implementation in steel plants, with the case study of what we do at Tata Steel. Let me go here. Please let me know if you have problems in hearing me or seeing the slides.
Okay, it's okay till now. Yeah.
Thank you. So if you look at the global scenario on emissions and look at the various industries that are responsible for these emissions, we see that electricity and heat production, agriculture, transportation, industry, they are they have significant shares in the overall CO2 emissions across the world today, right? About 30 gigatons of 35 gigatons of CO2 is emitted every year, and that's already 2-3 years old data. Now, there are industries such as transportation industry and electricity industry, which have already taken action to make themselves green, through renewable energy, through the advent of electric vehicles, both battery electric vehicles and also hydrogen-based electric vehicles. Now let's see how the so-called hard-to-abate steel sector fares if business as usual continues over the next 20-30 years. Considering that some of the large polluting sectors will become green over the next 20-30 years, if the steel industry, which is hard to abate, does not much, then at about 7% of contribution to the CO2 burden, the contribution of the steel industry will increase to about 33% of the global CO2 emission. Now, at that, it cannot simply be ignored, and we can't just sit and do nothing about it. So it is absolutely imperative that the steel industry looks actively at how to reduce CO2 emission. Now, let me take you through a few slides as to what the actual problem is in the steel industry. Now, the CO2 problem is like this. The previous speaker spoke about energy and Exergy being related to environment. Here, the CO2 is more related to the reduction process. So roughly 1 ton of steel, which is obtained from whatever tons of iron ore, needs to be reduced using a reductant, and the easiest available reductant is carbon, and that produces the CO2. So 1 ton of steel produces about 2.5 tons of CO2 on the average. There are plants that are more efficient in terms of usage of raw materials and the quality of raw materials that can produce about 1.8 or 2 tons of CO2. And there are plants which are less efficient and can produce even as much as 3 tons of CO2. But on the average, 1 ton of steel produces 2.5 tons of CO2. Right? That is the problem. Now, which means, if I go back to this slide, that India has an ambition to produce 300 million tons of steel by 2030, 2035, whenever, maybe the next 10, 15 years. Today, it produces 100 million tons. Now, it would mean that even at the efficiency level of 2.5, India would be making 700 million tons of CO2 annually. If we use just the rainforest to absorb that CO2, about 2 million square kilometers of rainforest would be required. And you can imagine what that would mean in terms of fraction of India's landmass to be covered by rainforest. So that is obviously not a solution. So various routes are adopted, and the steel companies are trying to adopt to solve this problem. One, of course, is you go ahead with the current current technology for iron and steel production. You produce the CO2 and then try to capture it and use it to fix the CO2, or sequester the CO2 in underground spaces which are left vacant either naturally or due to the extraction of oil from underground oil wells. Of course, the other way is to change the reductant itself, so carbon direct avoidance, where you use the other most commonly used reductants such as hydrogen in place of carbon. And of course, that would mean you have to generate green hydrogen at scale. Imagine today's Indian steel production of 100 million tons, and I'm going to show you some of the numbers of the amount of hydrogen that would be required. So just to give you some example of just overall of what the steel industry is grappling with. So to produce 1 million tons of crude steel, and it sounds a big number, 1 million tons, but that's roughly the minimum unit of production that a reasonable steel plant would have. A sizable steel plant such as Tata Steel's Jamshedpur plant is a 10 million ton steel plant. So 1 million ton steel would need about 0.2 million tons of coal, about 0.35 million tons of coke, which is another form of coal, and it would produce 2.5 million tons of CO2 in the process. Of course, this shows the blast furnace in its very rough sketch on the left. And of course, the metal that comes out goes into a steel making vessel in the center of the picture, which is the right of the blast furnace, which uses oxygen to take to make it refined. But going further on, the exit gas, which contains CO2, which also contains carbon monoxide and a lot of nitrogen, because it's air that is blasted in. The exit gas has about 20% CO2, right? So this is not very rich in CO2. So we need a system which can absorb or take out the CO2 from this exit gas. And normally, the technology that is available at scale today, the amine system, would be used, and the CO2 from the blast furnace would be absorbed in an amine system. But once you absorb the CO2 and it's available in a concentrated form, what do you do with it? You can either sequester, and there are, India is not endowed with, at least not known, underground spaces for sequestering CO2. The only option left to Indian steel companies is to utilize the CO2. And of course, CO2 utilization means fixing in organic or inorganic molecules. And that technology today, or the series of technologies today, are at low technology readiness levels. And of course, again, let me remind you, this is needed at an extremely large scale. So our Jamshedpur plant, for example, which is a 10 million ton plant, would need 25 odd million tons, 23 million tons of CO2 to be either sequestered or utilized. So we need a technology or a set of technologies to handle that level of CO2. So let's look at hydrogen if it is used in place of carbon as a reductant. And if you use the current technology, which is blast furnace and the current oxygen furnace for steel making, this combination, as I said before, 1 million ton of crude steel would produce 2.5 million tons of carbon dioxide. Now, there are limitations regarding how much hydrogen you can inject in place of carbon. This whole blast furnace stands on coke. It is the only solid material left in the whole blast furnace, and iron becomes liquid, right? So you cannot do away with coke. So which means some amount of this carbon will remain in the blast furnace. Including hydrogen in the gaseous reactions inside the blast furnace changes the temperatures at the top of the furnace, which it is not used to. So there is a limit that is forced by physical and chemical and thermal conditions in the blast furnace, limiting to about 16,000 tons of H2 to be injected per ton of steel that is made, which means you can't really reduce significantly. You can reduce from, say, about 2.5 to 2.3 million tons of CO2. So the CO2 has to be addressed in a different manner. So if the technology itself is changed, a different technology is used for making iron and steel rather than the blast furnace. You can use a gas-based direct reduced iron process where you can use either natural gas or hydrogen to reduce the iron ore. Then roughly about, again, 60,000 tons of hydrogen would be needed to make 1 million ton of crude steel. And here, of course, you can use an electric arc furnace to melt the direct reduced iron, which is in solid form, and using electric arc. And assuming that that electricity is green, you can reduce what was 2.5 million tons of CO2 to a level of about 0.1 million tons of CO2, a significant reduction and near net zero, right? Now, the hydrogen that we would need to make this possible needs to be green, and is also used, can be used for other purposes, for example, in carbon capture and utilization. So you can imagine that a steel plant today, which works on blast furnace, cannot suddenly get rid of all its blast furnaces. There's a huge capex involved, cannot suddenly get rid of all the blast furnaces and transform everything to DRI, your direct reduced gas-based direct reduced iron route. So over a period of time, you can make the change in technology. But as we foresee for the next 15, 20, 25 years, there will be blast furnaces in India. And as long as there are blast furnaces, you will need to have carbon dioxide utilization, capture and utilization, and hydrogen that you would produce, green hydrogen that you would produce to act as a reductant. Excess of it would be needed to capture and utilize the CO2 that would come out from the legacy technologies. And you can use hydrogen to react with the CO2 to make methanol. You can use the hydrogen together with the CO to produce ethanol as well. Now, all these technologies are today being tried out worldwide. So there's hybrid process, the Salcos process, and Arcelor. They're all being tried out in Europe. POSCO is trying out its own way of hydrogen-based steel making. So, and they're all at pilot scale. So nothing is today available at the scale of millions of tons, hydrogen-based. This will take time, this will take money. Carbon capture and utilization added at the end of the blast furnace would add roughly $200 per ton additional cost on steel make. Hydrogen today at $3-4 per kg will add again about $300-400 per ton on the cost of steel. So hydrogen becomes viable for commercial steel making only if it is about $1 per kg. Now, while of course the cost of hydrogen comes down, people are trying at pilot scale, at demo scale, like as I've shown in the slide, the use of hydrogen in various forms of iron making. Now, of course, the amount of hydrogen that is needed, and I said that it's about 60,000 tons per million ton of steel, is significant. It's large, and there are multiple technologies that would be needed to produce that hydrogen, because any one technology would probably need a large footprint, almost equivalent to a 1 million ton steel plant's footprint. And of course, it will need concentrated resource for that particular type of hydrogen making. So, for example, electrolysis, right, is one of the technologies that is most advanced in production of hydrogen. We are looking at biomass, and it was discussed at length from an energy perspective. We're looking at biomass for the production of syngas and also for the production of char that can be used in iron making. And we're looking at new technologies such as chemical looping combustion, where you can use iron oxide in a cyclic manner to capture CO2, concentrate the CO2 and capture the CO2, and also to produce hydrogen from the CO part of the blast furnace gas. So this is roughly some of the numbers that we are looking at in hydrogen related to steel making. 1 million ton of hydrogen will probably need about 60 gigawatts of electricity. 1 million ton of hydrogen through the chemical combustion route will need enormous amounts of coke oven gas and blast furnace off gas for carrying out the chemical looping combustion. 1 million ton of hydrogen through the biomass route would need about 13 million tons of biomass. And and you can see the numbers, roughly 620 million tons of crop residue is produced in India, and roughly 100 million tons of that will be needed, which is burned. So out of that 13 million tons, which is a reasonable number, one would think, to produce 1 million ton of hydrogen. So we do feel that biomass is a sensible route for producing hydrogen and hydrogen-rich gases for reduction gases in the iron making process. Just to look at some of the scales today, we're looking at planning for 300 million tons of steel in India, which would need about 18 million tons of hydrogen. That roughly is about 25% of world's hydrogen production. So it will increase in the future, but that's a significant portion of the world's hydrogen production. So you can imagine the load on production of hydrogen for steel making. This is what Tata Steel is currently putting in place in its various plants. Today we have a 5 tons per day carbon capture plant in our Jamshedpur unit, which is where the CO2 is captured as an amine system, and the captured CO2 is not let out; it is actually used in the plant in 2 ways. One is to soften cooling water through the cooling that comes through the cooling circuit in the steel plants, and the second way is to bubble through this liquid iron, which is being converted into steel to increase the stirring efficiency inside the steel bath. So we are looking at multiple ways of utilizing that CO2 in order to fix that. So we are putting up as a next upscale a 15 tons per day carbon capture unit, which will then be reacted with hydrogen, a 2 ton per day hydrogen unit to make 10 tons per day of methanol. And hydrogen generation, we're looking at multiple technologies, not necessarily all used at the same place. We're looking at an electrolyzer. We're looking at a hydrogen source through biomass, and we're putting up a pilot plant in our Kalinganagar site. And we are looking at hydrogen production from steel mill off gases through the chemical looping technology I spoke about a few minutes back. We are also looking at carbon capture in as mineral through mineral carbonation in these in steel plant slags, which would create mineral so inorganic mineral, and the aggregate could be used in cement making or in other forms of construction. For this purpose, we have, of course, a large number of collaborators. We are collaborating with the CSIR laboratories under an umbrella project on carbon capture and utilization. We are working with multiple companies which have expertise in handling of hydrogen gas, such as Linde, Air Liquide, etc. TNO of Netherlands, the Ohio State University, Polycrack as a company for a startup company for the biomass pilot plant. We are looking at collaborations. We're working in collaboration with Carbon Clean Solutions, which is a startup in CCU space. We are working with Carbicrete for the formation of for capturing of CO2 in an inorganic form through reaction with steel slag, and so on and so forth. So this is a brief description of what Tata Steel is putting in place through various pilot plants and demo plants in its various sites, and in order to address the CO2 problem which I described here, hopefully, of course, these are long-term projects. The solutions are not available today, but as we progress over the next 3, 5, 7 years, maturing from pilot to demo to industrial scale, we will see significant portion of the CO2 being addressed, both through carbon capture and utilization, and through generation and use of green hydrogen together. So multiple technologies will be needed, extensive collaboration will be needed, and we will need the government to play its role through policy in order to make this a level playing field internationally, because all of this will add cost to steel making invariably, and we need to be able to still be competitive to compete with steel being made across the world. So with this, let me thank you again for inviting me to this R&D conclave. I enjoyed speaking to you. I hope you enjoyed listening to me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. This was an excellent presentation about a sector that we in the Lovraj Kumar Trust and the industry that most of us come from, the oil and gas, are not much aware about it, but we only read from IEA reports and other media coverages that the steel sector is the must sector which must undergo decarbonization in a major way because of the intensity of carbon emissions coming from that. So before I look at 1 or 2 questions that have come, I just wanted to ask you one question. The biomass-based hydrogen that you have considered is through gasification?
It is through gasification, yes.
It's gasification.
Gasification, of course, it uses proprietary catalysts.
Okay, it's catalytic gasification based.
Yes.
Okay, fine, thank you. Just one or two questions that have come before we move to the next speaker. One is this: how much does the by capturing carbon, how much does the steel cost increase? Which you
I've covered it roughly in my talk.
Roughly.
It goes up by, depending on which route, etc., it goes up by about $150 to $200 per ton.
per ton. Okay.
And it's quite wide variation depending on geography, depending on whether you're using hydrogen, what's the cost of hydrogen, if you're using CCU technology, utilization technology. But yes, it's roughly $150 to $200 per ton.
The next question is: what is Tata Steel's plan for low CO2 generation using green hydrogen or gray hydrogen in steel industry? Which is basically what you covered in.
This is basically what I spoke about. We're using looking at 3 different hydrogen generation technologies. Some of them will become green as electricity becomes green, and some of them will be inherently green, such as biomass.
Okay. Another question: how carbon dioxide is stored underground? What is the depth of storage facility? I'm not very sure whether you are in a position to answer that.
We're not, because India doesn't have that opportunity, so we don't have the opportunity.
Okay, so I think there are no more questions, and your presentation has covered.
I have a comment here, Dr.
Yes.
Deshpande.
Yeah.
I just want to ask Dr. Bhattacharya, is it possible to do CO2 sequestration? Because they are, of course, doing mining of iron ore. Now, is it possible to mineralize CO2, the mined area they have already used, and CO2 sequestration and mineralization in the mined area?
So iron ore mines are open cast mines, so that won't happen. The only underground mines are some of the coal mines. Unfortunately, coal mines have fissures, and you really don't know how far these fissures run and where they open up. So they are not really closed systems. So that's why we felt it is not possible to do sequestration in our own mines, that is.
Okay. So if there are no new questions, let me see. There seems to be one new message. Okay. Something about methanol. Let me see. What is the efficiency of methanol production from CO2 and hydrogen?
Yeah, we have to find that out.
You have to find it out yet.
You have to find it out. The pilot plant is just being set up.
It will be coming out of the pilot plant work. Okay.
Correct. Absolutely.
Thanks a lot. There are not many other questions, only some good comments about your presentation. So
thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, very kind of you.
On behalf of all
Thank
the
you for inviting
audience.
me again.
So we move to the last presentation by Dr. Maiti. Dr. Mehti, he is a PhD from IIT Delhi on hydrodynamic studies in trickle bed reactors. And he is today's Senior General Manager in the R&D Division of Engineers India Ltd. I have been his colleague a couple of years back and enjoyed working with him. He has 30 years of rich experience in development of multi-phase flow type reactor technology for diesel hydrotreating, diesel hydrodesulfurization, food grade hexane and gas cracking. He was involved in the energy audit studies at Saudi Aramco plants, and he is today working on technology development for coal to liquids through gasification route and slurry hydrocracking as well. So over to you, Dr. Mehti. Topic for your presentation, let me tell, it is CCU carbon capture initiatives in EIL.
Just I'm loading my
please
presentations.
Yeah, it's visible now. Go ahead.
Is it visible?
Yes.
Thank you, sir, for kind introduction. My presentations overview is like that. I want to touch upon that major CO2 that sources in the refinery. Basically, it is mostly known, but still I want to mention that what sort of contaminants are there when we go for CO2 capture from gas sweetening experience towards that CO2 capture specifically for refinery or fertilizer area. And then CO2 capturing technology, it is well known, but in what some context I want to highlight that we need to improve that solving systems development. Then I will touch upon that EIL's experience or initiatives in acid gas or CO2 capturing. Specifically, we have much experience on that gas processing area, gas sweetening commercial design. But we have moved to that how to capture CO2 from refinery of gas or other streams. And then in gasifier, we are developing that coal to, we are working on that coal to liquid transformations using gasification route, whereas we have set up that syngas cleaning sections where we are developing that how CO2 can be captured from that syngas coming from the coal gasification systems. Then some utilization initiative we have initiated towards utilization of the CO2, captured CO2. Though it is a very vast and the talked area, but some initiatives of what we have started that I want to touch upon. Showing that oil and gas sectors, that majority of that stream, that HU of gas or from that gases from that fire heaters, that flue gases or FCC regeneration flue gases. Other than that CO2 and that other contaminants, this presence of oxygen, SOx or NOx, these are the ingredients which hampers that efficiency of the solvent or what has been used towards that that stability and that corrosivity. That's why that component very important and we have to keep in mind. In fertilizer area, hydrogen is a key input for production of ammonia, which is used as a base material for urea and other complex. Hydrogen is produced through that shift, that SMR, and then followed by that water gas shift for production of ammonia through HEPA process. In gas processing area, that CO2 capture, the ARU, that I mean regeneration system, that CO2 is getting out, that CO2 is peculiarly very good. That is, purity is more than 95%, and rest of the thing mostly water vapor. So that stream is very important, and we want to highlight how that stream can be tapped for utilizations. Now that CO2 capture, different process and that methods already already briefed about others, so I will skip it. Only things that each different that solvent supplier or proprietary solvent has different principles, limitations, and applications. However, that the CO2 recovery is reported to be high in case of solvent systems compared to that membrane systems or say that adsorption systems. So the membrane systems normally used for the bulk that is CO2 separations, and adsorptions it should be for that low concentration of CO2 that may be more efficient. But till now that to solvent systems mostly that CO2 are captured. From that proprietary solvent suppliers, a lot of proprietary solvents are there and being used, but a lot of feedbacks from the user industries like that. These are susceptible to degradations with a trace of SOx or say oxygen presence, and the high solvent makeup cost that is evaporation of the solvent, and high know-how fees. So there is a requirement that indigenous technology should be developed with considering all these factors. Now coming to that gas shortening, that using a solvent system, EIL already capability for process design of acid gas system using in-house capability or with tie-up with specialty supplier. This broadly covers high pressure natural gas shortening units, more than 50 atmospheric pressure, or also for low pressure refining area. And the list of that commercial design already EIL has done. So EIL is experienced with how to handle these solvent systems for gas sweetening. From that point of view, we have expanded our that solvent system formulations methodology, and we have developed and patented that amine-based formulated solvent. This is basically the hybrid solvent systems to capture CO2 from streams like refinery of gas, biogas, NG, synthesis gas, where other contaminants also play a role for this efficiency. So our formulated solvent is comprised of tertiary amine, primary amine, activator, and water with proper that ratios, so that each component can handle based on that target stream compositions and contaminants presence, and this that formulated solvent could be used. And we can operate it in the temperature, low temperature range, 25 to 25 degrees centigrade, and low partial pressure of CO2 stream can be used for absorbing CO2. And we have the improved acid gas loading, which is a major that contributing towards that cost economic solvents. That acid gas loading, we have reached up to 1.15 mole of acid gas per mole of amine solutions that we are claiming. So that amine-based formulated solvents and model based on solvent formulation strategy to capture CO2 from stream available with EIL. That means we have the solvent formulation strategy and methodology based on that equilibrium data generated. We can take up any type of streams, and we can come out with that what should be the suitable formulated solvent for that. Coming to that utilizations of that absorption, CO2 absorption strategy, one of our that CO2 absorption from syngas cleaning that we have set up in our R&D center, which consists of that syngas from coal gasifications, first to be scrubbed with the water. Then there will be that converter, COS and ACN converter, that reactors we have placed to remove that COS and ACNs, which is detrimental to that solvent system. Then the scrubber to shift we have not placed. And after that, we have a that solvent systems circuit, that regenerations absorption in place in our system, so that we can test that formulated solvent also based on that available target compositions to arrive at that proper solvent formulated solvent systems. This is our that pilot plant. It's a capacity of 350 Nm per hour, quite a big site, targeting 150 kg of coal gasification plant that we can handle up to that. That way it has been designed, and it is equipped with all these sequential the scrubber, 2 scrubbers, regenerator, ammonia absorber, and that we have, it is generic. We can test and formulated solvent also. Now coming to the utilizations of CO2, a lot of that the briefs already presented by our earlier. But what we have initiated that whether that CO2, captured CO2 from that fertilizer plant can put to add any value additions. So whatever cushions available in the operating one fertilizer plant, we can absorb, say 12, we have worked out some scheme with the figures to conceptualize and come out with that some economic analysis, not detailed analysis we have done, so that we can produce 12.5 TPD of CO2 we can capture, and that CO2 can be put to that urea productions, that cushion available the production plant with say 10% over margin, whatever is there, without hindering that ongoing plant operations. So 12.5 TPD CO2 we can capture, and we can put with the additional ammonia required to convert it to urea, and for that additional 4.5 TPD natural gas we can put. So using that additional 4.5 TPD natural gas, we can capture 12.5 TPD CO2 and can be put to the urea productions. So that additional CO2 productions will be 12.5 ton per day, without any impact on urea plant due to additional productions. So that is that cushions, and this is predicting on that whether that captured CO2 can be retrofitted in the ongoing system also. Some part of we can utilize. And another that for that gas processing plant, that alkaline wastewater, before going to the that ETP, it has to be treated for that lowering its pH from 13 to 14 to 7.5 to 8. That means acid to be added to neutralize it. So instead of acid, that CO2 captured CO2, which is very pure and available, that can be used for that. So that we have utilized, and we have come out with this scheme, and we have designed for these applications. In existing system, the spent caustic stream is neutralized using HCl or H2SO4, and then proposed systems by using the concept of aqueous carbonations of alkaline OH stream, that HCl can be replaced with waste CO2, which is available in the system. So these are the area where we have focused our development to implement. So EL had carried out a lab scale study for that. We have developed this process to use this CO2 stream to replace this HCl. We have started in a lab. We're taking that actual sample from the plant and optimize the value, all that parameters. And with respect to CO2 flow rate, residence times, all the transfer, transfer parameters. Then that process scheme has been developed, and a BDEV has been prepared. This is completed for neutralization of alkaline wastewater for GAIL Pata plant. But the benefits that it can avoid that complex chemical handling systems and water contaminations to metals in commercial HCl. If we use the commercial HCl, actually it is bearing some metals also. The CO2 is better than strong acid for controlling pH. Greenhouse gas emissions reductions. We have carried out that annually 800 tons of CO2 can be utilized per plant. So in conclusions, there are various CO2 rich stream at various pressures, CO2 concentrations, H2S concentrations with contaminants available in gas and oil sector for CO2 capture. There are several methods for CO2 capture from refinery stream, that adjacent membrane and that, sorry. CO2 recovery is reported to be high in case of solvent systems route at low to high pressures. Proprietary solvent-based CO2 capture technology available, but need to be improved with respect to gas loading, stability, corrosiveness, solvent loss, etc. EIL is experienced with licensing and commercializing or designing of a number of gas sweetening units. EIL recently has developed amine-based formulated solvent and model-based solvent formulation strategy to capture CO2 from streams like refinery of gas, biogas, NG synthesis gas, with higher gas loading and stability. Towards the utilization of captured CO2 initiatives, we have 2 initiatives initiated. A process scheme has been developed or conceptualized for additional urea productions capturing CO2, and developed process which has been patented along with the GAIL for neutralization of alkaline wastewater along with GAIL PATA, and that bid has been completed. Thank you, sir, giving opportunity to present us in that LKMT for our initiatives towards CO2 utilize, capture CO2 as well as use that capture CO2. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Mantri. Thank you for your presentation. I know you had the last speaker slot, which is not always the most comfortable one, but you were able to finish it within the time slot that we had put for you. We wanted to close the webinar by 7 o'clock, and you are very close to it now. I'll just take one question on your presentation, because other questions probably you can handle offline also. How is the solvent performance? How is the solvent performance in presence of feed gas impurities? How much reduction in regeneration energy demand as compared to the conventional amine did we experience?
So that we have not worked out the energy demands, but loading we have reached that 1.15 that moles per mole of amine.
Okay.
But for the particular that CO2 capture, that type of that BDF formulations and that figure we have not worked out.
Okay. It will be done as a part of.
But definitely, sir, that loading has increased. It will have an impact on that energy savings.
Yeah. So it's a part of your pilot plant work, right?
Yes.
Which you are doing right now, currently in process.
Yes, yes.
Okay. For a rich solvent, loading of 0.75 mole per mole, is it likely to cause corrosion problems?
No. That
depends on per mole.
That not only 0.75, we have reached up to 1.15. That depends on that formulations of that component. That we have that tertiary amine, primary amine, and that activators. That ratio. All these components, and also in additives, sulfonal also we add. This is giving physical characteristics. Some piperazine is there, but sulfonal is not that much corrosive. So that nature of that components present in that our formulated solvents, it won't give that corrosive nature.
Okay.
I think the screen has gone out.
Yeah, okay. So I guess we have come to the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. And thanks to all the speakers for having caught the attention of, yes, Professor Pandit, you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to compliment the organizers for collecting all this and conducting this outstanding R&D conclave.
Thanks a lot. This is the third R&D conclave which we are doing. Normally the Lovraj Kumar Trust has been doing workshops, which have been several in the last 15, 16 years. But the R&D conclave was a new concept which we brought in for the first time. We had a first conclave on coal gasification, a second one on upstream oil production. And this is the third one that we have on carbon capture.
Very good.
And it couldn't have come at a more opportune time, just immediately after the COP26 deliberation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot to draw out from the presentations, and that has formed a part of the theme paper. So I guess we have come to the end of it, and now I am handing it over to Dr. Malhotra to sum up the...
Sorry, Dr. Deshmukh.
Yes.
Deshpande Sahab, Anil Razdan, on behalf of the trust, also thank an excellent program today. It's been extremely enriching and very practical. And thank you on behalf of our trust. Dr. Malhotra is also the trustee who's organized it, and you've anchored it so well. I just want to thank you. Very practical.
So for the benefit of all the panels, let me introduce Mr. Anil Razdan. He is one of our senior most trustees, a former secretary to Ministry of Power, Government of India. And incidentally, he was the person responsible and instrumental in getting Dr. Fatih Barol to give the Lovraj Kumar Memorial Lecture this year. Through his own personal contacts, he was able to persuade Dr. Fatih Barol to become the speaker for this year's memorial lecture. Thanks a lot, Dr. Anil Razdan. Thanks a lot. So, Dr. Malhotra, it's over to you now.
Thank you for organizing it so well, Mr. Deshpande. I think, as has been already said, I think you removed my bio. It's not necessary from the screen. Let this be just. Who has put it over there? Okay.
Dr. Malhotra is too well-known a person to need an introduction. So
no. Actually, we are also behind schedule.
Yes.
So I would like to just thank all the participants, all the speakers, actually, for wonderful presentations. In fact, the tone was set by our chairman, Mr. B.K. Chaturvedi, in the morning, as you also said, that this has rightly come at an appropriate time when COP26 just concluded, and he very rightly said that carbon capture utilization is important, and India has made commitments which will require very serious actions, I believe, by all the stakeholders. And I'm glad that a lot of people in India are doing a lot of work, actually, which is amazing. And this gives us confidence that we'll have cost reduction for CCUS, as was said by Mr. B.K. Chaturvedi at my end, or somehow, or maybe we are so we are behind schedule, and it logged off automatically. Maybe, I don't know. I just went off the air, and I also find that people must have been looking forward to their evening schedules. Mr. Ajit Safre's presentation, I was really impressed. I think sustainability issues, which and quietly Reliance seems to have been doing wonderful job, and the various technologies which he talked about, and the biocrude pricing, he said that is required. I fully agree with him. Well, we are giving incentives for biofuels. Why not give incentives for biocrude as well, And as he said that it is $50 per barrel if it is if the incentives are given like US and Europe. It's amazing. And this photosynthesis work, which sunlight plus CO2 plus CO water to algal oil, I think that's remarkable. So I must compliment you, Dr. Safre. You have always been a good speaker, good things you always bring out in R&D conclaves, whether organized by FIPI. And today was really amazing. I must compliment you and your team at Reliance. And
I think what we truly need is a spirit of risk-taking and support for indigenous technology that will help India leapfrog rather than just chasing what the world is doing.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with you. And what you mentioned was the spirit of not only the innovation, but invent in India. I fully agree with you as a researcher. I also believe that I think we really need to invent and just not be only doing innovations. And I recalled one of the presentations where the difference between innovation and inventions were made by one of the prominent people from SA International, who had given a lecture on this topic, actually, Anyway, thank you very much for giving a wonderful talk. And then Professor Pandit, you introduced one concept of, this energy, Exergy efficiency. How we are wasting energy, you brought out how as a resource assessment. I think that was wonderful, and I was pleasant. I didn't know that you are also from IIT BHU like me. Of course, you are a few years younger than me. I saw it 80 batch, and I am 75 batch from BHU. I'm mechanical and you are chemical, so that's again another difference. But anyway, it was a pleasant information for me to learn that. Mr. Bhattacharjee also, steel plants, I think something which is very important. We are also talking about coal gasifications and then using it for hydrogen for steel plants. Some of the work which he is doing, I think, is also very important, and the country needs that kind of things. So I think Tata Steel will also lead and most difficult sector is steel for carbon abatement, as he also said. So this is something remarkable, and this is a piece of information that the quantities of green hydrogen which will be required. Everybody is talking about green hydrogen. I don't know where the green hydrogen is going to come from. Are we going to continue to produce power from coal and use green hydrogen for refineries? And as is being talked, I think the policymakers need to have a relook at all those kind of things. And till such time, he said that you have hydrogen available at $1 per kg. You can't, it can't be used. So $1 per kg, as Mr. Ambani has said, that by 2030. So let's wait until such time. I think that there's no harm in using gray hydrogen or blue hydrogen for that matter, and CCUS technologies are now available. So let us focus on blue hydrogen. I always believe that the green hydrogen revolution will have to piggyback on blue hydrogen. We can't wait for green hydrogen to come to $1 and then start building up the infrastructure or develop the utilization centers for green hydrogen. We have to develop blue hydrogen, which is possible. Looks like after the seminars, it gives a lot of confidence that we can have large quantities of blue hydrogen produced either from the coal gasification route or biomass gasification route, and so on and so forth. So lastly, Mr. Mehti, thank you very much. I'm aware about some of the efforts which started during Ajit Deshpande's time and about,
Sir, please continue. Yeah.
I don't know what has been happening when I started speaking. Earlier, the whole time this was all right. Anyway, so I would like to now conclude only with thanks to all the speakers, and thanks to Ajit Deshpande, who has put up a very good program together. I could not actually, Mr. Razdan was giving me credit as an organizer, but I hardly have done anything because I was busy with so many other things, and we all in trust left it to Mr. Ajit Deshpande, who has really done a remarkable job by putting excellent speakers in today's R&D Conclave, and thank you very much. Ajay, thanks to Chaturvedi ji and Razdan Saab, etc., and all the members, in our trust for planning, for thinking of organizing this kind of R&D Conclave. So thanks once again to all the speakers, and we hope that India will embark upon CCUS technologies in a larger way, and we will have cost-effective and very effective utilization of these technologies to meet our commitments which we have made, our Honorable Prime Minister has made at COP26, which can only happen if we all work together for this CCUS side. Thank you so much.
Sir,
over to you. Over to you for final word.
Who should thank you? You are the...
No, you are the final word to you. Why you have to thank
Dr.
me?
Dr. Malhotra has always been supporting the Lovraj Kumar Trust through his FIPI organization by arranging and facilitating this Zoom meet software and assistance through his team of people who are giving absolutely error-free performance. And I think today's conclave has been the best in terms of quality. I mean, if you see the video, excepting for the final aberration in your case.
From my end and from my home. No, I'm from my home. So
oh, I see. You're from your home. I thought probably because you have kept your books at the back, maybe it's your office.
No, this is my study room. This is my study room.
So a final thanks to you, Dr. Malhotra, and thanks to all the speakers.
Thank you.
And to the sponsors also.
No, I can only...
Including Mr. Prabhas from HMEL. Mr. Prabhas from HMEL. Pardon, sir?
I can only assure that I will be leaving FIPI next month, but I will tell my successor to continue to support Trust for these kind of activities, by supporting Zoom and other kind of infrastructure needs, which will be there for organizing such conclaves. I'm sure my successor will agree. But I will be leaving FIPI in any case, and I will have more time to devote to this LKMT Trust and other activities which I am planning to do. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll have you in a more active role in the trust now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot, sir. Finally, thanks to all the speakers.
Thank you.
Professor Pandit, I must compliment the excellent engineering conclave that you had at INE. It was a wonderful event. I saw all of it.
It was really
and very impressed by
we are coming out with the transcripts which will be circulated to all the fellows soon, along with the video link of all the presentation as well.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
We hope to see you in future again on our platform.
Indeed, my pleasure.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you.